Chayre Chaverim, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might find yourself. To talk to the Rebbe's point in the Sikha just before, if I sit before you today as a Shliach at the European Union headquarters in Brussels, trust you me, the Rebbe has empowered us, and how. I think the last time me and Rabbi Moshe Shiner met was in the hallways of Ocean Parkway. He was a tall fellow back then, and I was a very little boy. He's very spiritually tall today as well, and I'm privileged and honored to be here side by side with you and to introduce Rabbi Moshe Shiner, of the Rabbi of the Palm Springs Synagogue in Florida. Bavakasha.
Good morning, L'chaim. It's good to see you as well, L'chaim.
I'm the Racha.
Once again, like everyone else before me, I want to thank the Arganim for organizing this global Farbrengen. First of all, bringing Chassidim together, Shevas Achim Gam Yachad, but also to keep the Rebbe's call and cry on Chaf Ches, Nissen, Tashin, and Aleph, Ich hab getan als was ich kennt, tut als was ihr kennt, that many of us, myself included, was zeicher to be there at that Sicha, and we remember how Chassidim were going literally out of that Kalim. It was such a rash when the Rebbe cried out, tut als was ihr kennt, and now some 31 years later, thanks to the Tut als was ihr kennt, Moisid 302, and the argument of this global Farbrengen, it can remind us all to go back to that moment 31 years ago, those who were there, those who were not there, to be ma'ated ourselves to, as they say, double down and realign ourselves and refocus on ourselves. What the Rebbe said is the main shlichus of our generation, which is to bring about the Kabbalah's Mashiach Tzidkenu. They tell a story about a fellow who came to a town. He went over to a guy in the street. He says, "Can you do me a favor? Can you lend me $1,000? And the fellow said, $1,000? I don't even know you. How can I lend you $1,000? So the guy said, it's funny. In the town I come from, no one wants to lend me $1,000 because they know who I am. And here, they don't want to lend me $1,000 because they don't know who I am. So who is going to lend me the $1,000? When it comes to Mashiach, we find two categories. We find those who Pasha don't know what Mashiach is. So are they going to bring Mashiach? On the other hand, sometimes you could have a matzah with someone who does know what Mashiach is. But yet, the Rebbe felt that we're not demanding enough Mashiach. We don't want it enough. Why? Whatever reasons the Yetzer Hara gets involved and tells you, life is good like it is. I don't know, it's a little scary. Mesa Mashiach, what's going to be with my life, with my circumstances. But the Rebbe's message was that this is the Gula Shlema, and every year has to go out. Whether you do know, whether you don't know, every year is going out. Like what the Rebbe said to the Ben Rasha and the Haggadah, Ila Yisa Sham La Yanigel, Sham, you wouldn't be nigel. But in the Gula Shlema, every year is going to go out. And therefore the Shlichus of the Reinu Zeh is to make sure that every Yid knows about Mashiach and is ready to greet Mashiach, because La Yidach Mimenu Nidach, every Yid is going to go out. And perhaps this is the inyan that, we came from Achin Shal Pesach when we had the Sudas Mashiach. And of course, Baal Shem Tov was miyaseh the Suda to take place in Achin Shal Pesach. The Rabbeim, of course, the Rebbe Rashab instituted that it should be like Al Derech Kimeitzeis Chumeres Mitzrayim Eren the Floys, like just by the Seder, there was the Arba Kaisis, we should have Arba Kaisis, and understand that the Gula is Hemshech from the original Gula, and we're going to go out of Golus. And it's interesting that the Sudas Mashiach and the day of the Haftarah dedicated to Mashiach follows the day of Kriyas Yamsuf. And one of the connections perhaps to Kriyas Yamsuf is that we all know that there were 4 groups of Yidden at the Yamsuf, different opinions what to do. And the Eibishter said, Dabra b'nei Yisrael v'Yisrael, tell the Yidden they should just go further, just be Mamshach. And Nachshon ben Aminadav jumped into the water, and of course the water split. And the shaila is, if Moshe Rabbeinu got the tzivui of Dabra b'nei Yisrael v'Yisrael, why didn't Moshe jump in? He was the one who got the tzivui. But Dafka Nachshon jumped in. And the answer obviously is that Nachshon, when he heard the tzivui Dabra b'nei Yisrael v'Yisrael, he said, this is the Eibush just talking to me. And even though there's a Moshe Rabbeinu standing there and there are other manhigim, Aaron was there, this is my personal shlichus. I have to jump in. And sure enough, he brought about Kriyas Yamsuf. And so too, the Rebbe told us in Chav Ches Nissen that it's not only totally in him, it's totally in every one of us, that every one of us has the ability to be a Nachshon, to be the one that will take the message of bringing Mashiach Kipshutei personally, feel that it's their mission in life, their personal shlichus, and will do everything in their power to bring it about. And only when we all take up this mantle and this mission, only then will Mashiach come. Because like, if those who don't know about Mashiach, or those who do know, but don't care enough to bring Mashiach, will not do it, who will do it? And the answer is clear. Those who are Makusha to the Rebbe, and because it was an Indian that was Negeya Benefesh to the Rebbe, and those who was zeichet to stand at the Rebbe's Farbrengen, or learn the Rebbe's Sichos, or watch the videos from those days, you couldn't have a Sicha that the Rebbe didn't talk about Mashiach. Mashiach was the central focus. And so if you saw that it was so negated to the Rebbe, but Pnimis Nafshe, the Rebbe said since he was a child of 5 years old, he was machaka, he was dreaming about the Gula. So as part of our skashas to the Rebbe, this has to be negeh benefesh to us. And like Nachshon, we have to make this our mission. And again, thanks to the Ma'arganin, it's ma'ated us to once again refocus and remember that while we do many, many things in our shlichus, the focus and the central purpose of everything is to bring about the Gula. There's a Sikh in Chelik Lamed Hey, Parshas by Yigash, where the Rebbe talks about a Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin says that Amr Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Asad HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lahamed Lem David Acher, that the Eibush is going to appoint a new David as a Mashiach. Shenema V'ivdas Hashem Lekeichem as David Malcolm Asher Akim Lahem. Says the Gemara, Heikim Leinemer Al Akim. It says Hashem will establish a new David. Doesn't say Lashon Avar, Heikim, but Akim. So Amalei Rapapal Abaye, the Gemara says, Rapapa says, Abaye V'ksiva David Abdi Nasilam La'ilam. That David Abdi will be the Melech HaMashiach La'ilam. So the Gemara answers, Kegoin Keser or Palgi Keser, that there's going to be two Davids. There'll be a new David, and there'll also be David HaMelech. One will be a Keser, one will be the Melech, and one will be the Palgi Keser. One will be a Mishnah Melech. But the Rebbe asks, we all know there's a Melech and there's a Mishnah Melech. So why does the Gemara use the words Keser or Palgi Keser? V'aid befrat, the word Keser comes, of course, from the Roman emperors. They were called the Keser, the kings, the Caesar. In different languages, it could be the Keser, the Caesar, the Tsar in Russia. But why would the Gemara use the term Keser or Palgi Keser to describe Mashiach and David HaMelech when this was a title used by the Romans? And the Romans were the ones who destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. They're the reason we're in Golus. So why use the title from the Romans? Why not use Melech HaMashiach, the Melech U'Mishnah Melech? The Rebbe gives a fascinating answer based on the Tosfos. The Rebbe says as follows: where did the name Caesar come from? Caesar. What's the meaning behind this term? So in Latin, the word Caesar means a cut. Al-Derech, everyone's familiar with a C-section, a cesarean section. Cesarean section, of course, is when the mother cannot have a natural birth. So they cut open the mother's stomach to take the baby out, as it's described in the Mishnah, Yotze Dofen. It comes out of the wall of the stomach. So the Rebbe says that the word Caesar was because different opinions, whether it was Julius Caesar's mother, who was born through a Yotze Dofen, through a cesarean section, or it was his grandfather who was born through a cesarean section. And because of the cesarean section, he was called Caesar. And it became from generation to generation the title of all the Roman kings and emperors, that they were called the Caesars, and then translated into many different languages. But the Rebbe says, what's the inyan of calling somebody a Caesar because they had a cesarean section? And why would the Gemara refer to Mashiach based on the names of the Caesars in Rome? Caesar or Palgi Caesar? The Rebbe says that Al derech by Kriyas Yamsuf. The Yidden was standing there, and it seemed like there was no path forward. The Mitzrayim are coming behind them, the Yamsuf is in front of them, and suddenly Nachshon does one pull, he jumps into the Yamsuf, and suddenly there's a C-section, Kaviyachal, a cosmic C-section, where there's a split in the whole world, and the Yamsuf splits, and Bnei Yisrael are able to go through to freedom, and the Mitzrayim are drowned. Says the Rebbe that this is the inyan of Keser or Palgi Keser. The idea of Mashiach is, and the idea of every leader is, a true leader is somebody that where nobody else sees a path forward, where it seems that, as the Rebbe would say many, many times, and I heard from the Rebbe many times, the Welt shakelt sich. The world is in such turmoil, and today, when the world is as much in turmoil, if not more in turmoil, than it ever was. And people say, Me'ayin Yaveh Ezri. What's going to be? How will Mashiach come? And suddenly, there's a C-section. There is a Yetzer Deifen. There is a new path that's opened up. And the Keser, Melech HaMashiach, Upalgi Keser, they will show a new path forward for all of humanity that nobody was able to see, that nobody was able to envision. Something that seemed impossible, beyond reach. We look around and we say, how will Mashiach come? When will Mashiach come? But suddenly, Keherafayim, as the Rebbe said many, many times, Keherafayim, Mashiach will come. And suddenly a path will open up and all of the world will be nigel, will see the Geula. As the famous letter of the Rebbe to a Chassan and Tafshin Yud, after the Staltus of the Friedrich Rebbe, he said, write to the Rebbe wird gefunden aveg. And that's what we have to hold on today. It could be a chas v'shalom, an inyan of years. It's been 31 years since the Rebbe said this. When's Mashiach going to come? Is Mashiach still going to come? Chas v'shalom could be a doubt. Maybe the opportunity passed. Chas v'shalom. And so we have to hold on to this amunah and this betachin that the Rebbe said that we're the Deir HaShvi, we're the last Deir of Golus, the first Deir of Geula. And as the Rebbe zugesagt, it's going to happen. And the Rebbe wird gefunden weg. And like the term of Kesar, the Rebbe will open up. Mashiach will bring about a new path forward that was unforeseen, unexpected. But literally, as the Rebbe said, it will happen keherafayim. And most importantly, remembering what the Rebbe reminded us time and again, that he can't do it alone. And we have the schus to be part of the Rebbe's mission to bring Mashiach. And one pu'ula achas, as the Rebbe said many times in the Sichos, could be machriyas kala oilam kulay lekafschas, kafschus. In the brief time remaining, I want to share 3 stories that I experienced to illustrate how nobody should think, Vani akatin, what can I do? Because Hara comes and says, listen, who are you? How do you think your one Pa'ula is going to bring Mashiach? It's going to bring Geula. We know that the Geula Klolos is totally in the Geula Pratis of each Yid. And therefore, as the Rebbe said, every Yid has to go out, and therefore the message has to go out to every single Yid. And if everyone brings about Geula Pratis, then it'll bring about the Geula Klolos. As the Rebbe said many times, that when you put the Aleph of Alufei Shalaylam into Geula, it becomes Geula. So I want to share 3 stories, personal experiences, to show you how everyone, no matter who they are, could have an effect, a hashpah, an influence on others in a way that is completely l'maylam and ashur, but in a way that, as we said, an unforeseen path, a kesar, a cut, an opening that they could have never dreamed. First story goes to when I was a shliach in Melbourne, Australia. And it was Tafshin Nun. And we got a call, the yeshiva got a call from the shul. There was an Orthodox shul in Wellington, New Zealand. And they called us and they said that there's a Russisch Yidden immigrants that were coming to New Zealand. And the rabbi wasn't very equipped to deal with them. And Rahman al-Islan, there was this Meshumad who was reaching out to the Russian community and attracting many of the Russians to him. and going, teaching them about other things, about Yashka, Rahman al-Islam, Jews for Eisei Ha'ish. And the rabbi called the yeshiva, Rabbi Cohn in Melbourne, and said, Lubavitch is known to be able to do outreach, slichus. Can you send Bachrim? Because on Pesach, this Mishumid is organizing a Seder, and many of the Rosh Hashidim are going there. So the Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Cohn, came to myself and my Chavrusa, Sruli Hech, and said, will you go to Wellington, New Zealand to be ma'argin a Pesach Seder? So Chachaba, we packed up all the things we needed. We went to the shul in Wellington, New Zealand. They gave us a room to sleep, and we started planning this beautiful Seder. And we started advertising in town that we're going to have a Seder. And this was a week or two before Pesach, and the reservations were very schwach. We had 3 people coming, 4 people coming. We knew there were hundreds of Rosh Hashidim, but they weren't signing up for a Seder. So Mamish didn't know what to do. We started calling people. We're getting a lot of rejections. No. Finally, we're talking to people. Said, where are you going for Pesach? They said, oh, we're going to this guy's Seder. We said, can we come talk to you? So we got into a few homes. And when we spoke to them, they said, look, this person is very nice to us all year round. He calls on us. He takes us shopping. He takes us to the doctor's appointments. He's very devoted to us. We feel connected to him, and therefore we're going to a Seder. And as much as we try to explain to them that it's not a Seder, it's not kosher, Rahman al-Islam, he's talking about a different person, about Oisei Ish, and you don't belong in such a Seder. But these were Yidden Nebuch who came out of Russia. They didn't know any better, and they was talking to the walls. They were not interested in coming to our Seder. So finally, we asked them, where is the Seder held? And they said there's a certain Russisch couple that opened a restaurant in town. And they hosted in this Russisch restaurant. So Sruli and I said to each other, listen, let's go talk to this Russisch. If we could convince him that it's wrong, maybe we could be mevatel the whole Seder. So we drove out. It was a little bit in the suburbs. We drove out to this restaurant. It was before Waze. It wasn't so easy to get there. We had to have directions. It took us 30, 40 minutes. And finally we arrived. We see this restaurant. We get out of our car, our rental car. We walk in with our jackets and our tzitzis into this restaurant. We walk in, and there's a Russ Hashir, an older Russ Hashir, look maybe around 70, standing behind the counter. And the minute he looks at us, he sees Lubavitch Shebachim with beard and payas and tzitzis and a hat. And his first words out of his mouth was, Geh bald der Reis von dannen, weil morgen will ich nicht haben kein Koinen. Leave immediately because tomorrow I won't have any customers. And we just drove 40 minutes. This was our only hope. We started saying, please give us a few minutes. We want to just talk to you. Bald der Reis von dannen. Finally, we're not moving, and he's getting upset at us. He says, my grandson is going to throw you out. And he marches off to the back of the restaurant in the kitchen. This was like 11 o'clock in the morning. There weren't a lot of customers there. It was just starting the day. Sure enough, a minute later, he comes out of the swinging doors from the kitchen with this tall fellow, at least 6 feet. And this is his grandson. His grandson starts walking towards us, a tall, strong guy. And I remember Pasha being afraid we'll physically be thrown out. As he comes closer, he looks at me and he says, did you learn in Lubavitch Yeshiva on Ocean Parkway? I said, yes, I said, Moshe Shine. He says, I remember you. I said, you remember me? He says, yeah, we played ball together at Lubavitch Yeshiva. Couldn't believe my ears. I'm standing in Wellington, New Zealand, which is and he tells me he learned in yeshiva with me. The story was that in the early 80s, late 70s, a lot of Russian Jews came to Brooklyn, and they all settled on Ocean Parkway in the apartment buildings. And so the Lubavitch Yeshiva between H and I took the 4th floor. They got Rabbi Akanov, and they started a Russian division of the yeshiva. And this kid and his parents came to Brooklyn and lived in Ocean Parkway and came to Lubavitch Yeshiva. They had their own classes, but they played ball with us and ate lunch with us. And apparently, he remembered me from playing in the courtyard. And then his grandfather had a successful restaurant and needed help. So his parents moved from Brooklyn to New Zealand. And now this Anikel is working for his grandfather in the restaurant. The Zayd is looking, he couldn't believe that we're hugging each other. We're warm. I recognized him. I remembered his name was Boris. We said, could we sit and talk to you? We sat and talked to you. And he understood the matzav right away. He had learned in Lubavitch. He remembered Rabbi Akanov. He had such good memories of his yeshiva days, and he remembers how the kids were nice to him in the courtyard and played with him. And he was an immigrant child, and everyone had such warm feelings that came up. And he said, "I'll tell you what." He said, "I can't cancel because it's happening in a few days. There's 70, 80 reservations. But I promise you that our family, will not participate. We won't sit there. We won't be a part of it. We're going to do our own thing, and this will be the last year that we're ever going to host it." And Kachava, we had a Seder, Baruch Hashem, we managed to get 20, 30 people. And in the following years, Baruch went back, and this Seder in this restaurant was canceled, and it grew and it grew. And today, of course, there's a shliach in Auckland, New Zealand. And I thought to myself, we were little kids playing ball. But little did we know that our friendship, and of course, the ashpa of the rabbis, would have such an effect at the other end of the world. Second story I experienced was also a Pesach story. When I went with my friend Naftali Rottenstreich to Rabbi Itchel and Perel Krasnansky in Hawaii. And long story short, because time is short, he rented out a restaurant on Waikiki Beach. It was a treifa restaurant called the Crab Catcher, the El Crab Catcher, but we came in the night before, we kasha the whole place. It was a big seder the night of Pesach, 150 people showed up. By Shulchan Aruch, we ran out of shmura matzah. So Rabbi Krasniansky Yitzchel said to me, "Maishi, could you go to our hotel room, because we were staying in a hotel room near the restaurant for Yontif, and bring a few more boxes of shmura matzah?" So I said, sure. So I started walking with my hat and jacket towards the hotel on the night of Pesach, Leil Seder, and I'm walking through the streets. Now, Waikiki Beach is full of tourists and people walking in shorts and Hawaiian shirts. And as I'm walking, a couple comes towards me and they say to me, "Tagidli, yesh yeshiva po Hawaii? Is there a yeshiva in Hawaii?" I looked at them. I was ready after 2 cases. I was like, "Yeshiva? What do you mean?" They say, "Yeah, I see yeshiva boy. Is there a yeshiva?" I said, "No, there's no yeshiva boy here, but I'm here doing shlichut." And I say, "What are you doing in the streets of Waikiki on the night of Seder?" And they tell me that they were supposed to catch a flight to California, but they missed their flight and they got stranded here in Hawaii, and as a result, they didn't have a Seder to go to. And they tell me, "Upo Hawaii ain't klum. Here in Hawaii, there's nothing, so we're stranded." I said, "Po Hawaii ain't klum." I said, "Right now, there's a Seder in the corner restaurant with 150 people." He looks up and he says, "Efa Bel Crab Catcher?" And the El Crab Catcher, I said, "Yeah, we kashed it. There's a Seder." They couldn't believe. I said, "Come with me, I'll take you." They said, "We're dressed in shorts, Hawaiian t-shirt. How can we come?" I said, "I'll tell you what, where are you staying?" They said, "We're staying in this hotel in this corner." I said, "I have to go get shmura matzah from this hotel. You go get dressed in nice clothing. I'll meet you here in 20 minutes. And Kachava, I went to get the shmura matzah. They went to get dressed. We met them 20 minutes later. I met them. I brought them in. They walked in. They saw 150 people, mishpacha, sitting, praving a seder. They couldn't believe their eyes. I took them up to the front table. They sat right next to Rabbi Itchel and Perel Krasnansky. And they sat there the whole night. They just couldn't believe what was happening. I remember 1 o'clock at night, the place was empty. There were only us, Rabbi Krasnansky, his wife, me, my friend Naftali, and this couple singing Chavgadji at 1 o'clock in the morning. When they left, they said to us the following. They said, "We've been to Siddharim every year of our life. We thought this was Nebuch, the first year we're not going to be able to say that we're stranded in Hawaii. We didn't dream there was a Seder. And not only did we have a Seder, but this was the best and the most memorable Seder of our life, the most meaningful Seder, to be here in Hawaii with Yidden from all over the world having a Seder." And once again, the Rebbe gefindt weg, whether it was a story in New Zealand or the story in Hawaii, when you think there's no Yeshua, suddenly you realize that the Rebbe and the Eibishter is much higher than that. And all our cheshbainis are nothing. It all comes down to the Eibishter Bedurfen Zayin Inyan will find a way to bring about the Gula. We just have to do our part. And since time is running out, I won't tell the third story, but I'll just conclude by saying that the Morad Asher of Crown Heights, Rabbi Yaakov Shvei, Olav Shalom, was my Rebbe in Yeshiva in 11th grade. And he taught me many things. But the one thing I will never forget was whenever you asked Rabbi Yaakov Shvei whenever somebody would ask him, we would overhear, "Was macht der Reb Shvei?" He had a standard answer. You say, "Atog nenter zu Mashiachem," or he would say, "Asha nenter zu Mashiachem." And I'll never forget that. It made a very big impression. He was a Chassidish Yid who, what does it mean that today's Sunday? It's not Sunday. It's one day closer to Mashiach. And even though it's been 31 years, if we keep on remembering, and again, thank you to the Ma'arganim to remind us to remain focused, that every day and every hour, Atog nenter zu Mashiachem. And if we do our part, like Nachshon, we say it's not the Rebbe's Inyan alone, it's our Inyan. The Rebbe wants us to tut als was mir kennen, and we're willing to go out of our comfort zone and jump into the Yam Suf, so to speak, and take it personally. Then, like Kesar, there will be a new path, a new opening that the world could have never foreseen or imagined. And we will find that the Gula will come literally, as the Rebbe said, Kipshute, and we'll know that we brought about the Rebbe's greatest desire to bring about the Gula Mitzvah Vashlema.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Shiner, for those inspirational words and incredible stories. Like yourself, I was also in 770 that day when the Rebbe gave the Sikha. I'm not sure I understood a word, and I wasn't wearing a hat and jacket. I think I was in a t-shirt and my BMX bicycle was outside, and I probably stopped in for a drink. So wherever you might be on the spectrum, wherever you were that day, the message is loud and clear, and it makes no difference where, what, and when. The Rebbe empowered and empowers every single one of us and has a task for each one of us as well. We're going to go straight to a video clip of a Sikha from Yud Shvat Tavshin Chafei 1965. The Rebbe is speaking to that point. Thank you so much, Rabbi Shiner.
Bishaas mir lernen Chsidis und meint, dass zweitens Tate kann lernen Chsidis und kann wissen, was steht und kann lernen noch nicht gut und lernen richtig, aber auch nicht nicht Chalischen. Bishaas ist aber viele lernen Zweite, aber wissen, dass meint mir lernen, dass es sein Tate, dass es sein Marvinische Bashamayim wird der Chalischen. Sie da sehen, was Steinen darf sich nicht verlernen mit der Vorzitz am Marionis Chutze. Und darf sich nicht verlernen mit Versprechen Niedigkeit darum sich. Und darf nicht sein, die Mahade nach dieser Kauschel Divre Sefri, der Fall ist auch so Ajid, was älter von ihm und Krieger von ihm und Fremder von ihm und tut das sich nicht. In der Territz ist jener Ried meint, dass es sich wegen der zweiten Safote. Ich bin mir, jener hat ein Teus, dass das nicht kein Territz, als darf ich ein Teus haben. Und der Hadroche Klolis ist, dass das sich wegen der Wienische Bashamayim ist das wegen jeder Rieden Segen und Fote. Als tracht auf Fote Majones Chutze, dass bringen Maschichen, aber nicht mehr meint, dass soll mehr für sein und soll bringen Maschichen, ist nicht sein Business. Darf durchlehnen den Brief als Zweiten. Und der Übergeber, der Baal Shem Tov hat geschrieben, als Demot, was ja Futze meine Sache Chutze, koste mal Malke Maschiche. Und die überlehnt den Brief, den die Schulnik, und danach geht es sich weg und tut sich, was wenn kommt ist. Wie kaum kam vor mir, wie der Rebbe der Baal Elu hat gesagt, dass die letzte Tage in Golos, und der Rebbe brennende Wend von Golos. Und so tot jetzt in Biad Romo, ist er Chashod, jeder Piule, was man gekonnt hat, und mit tut nicht, halt mir sich auf, schinte, wie Shishim, Riebe bei Israel, noch ein Regen in Golos. Und für was tut mir das? Der Fall ist, hat sich angeschmust, dass er in Stadt und mehr nicht der Dolmetscher, was der Melamed, was darf durchlehnen, dem Geschulnik, was steht im Brief. Weil das ist sicher der Hero, was man gesehen von Bala Ilula, zusammen damit, was gegessen hat, zweiten Tag. Ist nicht nur, was sich richtig gewähnt, mit der Lernen Kabbalah mit der zweiten, noch Siris mit der zweiten. Wir können jetzt über sehr gelernt haben, bis mit der zweiten. Und gelernt werden lebend viel mit der Zweiten. Und gelernt, was sie mit der Bewohnen haben, so lassen Koscher mit der Zweiten. Was jeder Bewohnen der Zweiten nicht, so lassen Koscher nicht mit Glasfleisch, Koscher die Pschute, und keine Iduri. Und nicht dem Hefersche Base, und das hat ihn gedacht haben, dachte dem Libavischen Rebbe mit Malem Mokke. Sie konnte das schicken, die Mischores wollte das sicher die einem erklären. Und aber getan ist, dass sie gekommen wohl, ja doch, ist das Simen, das ist sein Bild. Und dass nicht der Pire, der Fall ist, darf jene Matzel sein, der Fall ist, darf sich Matzel sein. Und durch wird sich Matzel sein.
Moving right along, coming up next is Rabbi Yossi Gordon, director of Chabad on campus. Arguably, perhaps to some, but not to me. If I'm sitting here today, it's thanks to Rabbi Gordon's ancestors, Rabbi Yechanan Gordon, of blessed memory. And it's my privilege in Hashgacha Pratis to be able to introduce Rabbi Yossi Gordon. Bavakasha.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Rosenblum. L'chaim, l'chaim. So before I share something, I'd like to share a thought on sharing that I heard from Rabbi Nehemiah Vogel, who's the Rebbe Shliach in Rochester, New York, and a dear friend to me, a member of the Chabad on Campus VAD, who told me that before you speak publicly and before you go into an appointment, in order to be able to ensure that it's not you who does the talking, but the Eibishter, through the Rebbe's koiches that are found in you, you say a pasuk. And the pasuk is the pasuk that we say before Shemona Esrei. Hashem sefasei tiftach ufi agiti lasecha. Dinoi sefasei tiftach ufi agiti lasecha. You ask the Eibishter to open up your mouth, and that your lips should say his praises. And then whatever emerges is the right thing, because therefore you've surrendered, so to speak, your ability to be able to make it so whereby it's the right thing to the Eibishter. He never makes a mistake, and he always has the right thing. So in this half hour, I'd like to share with you, firstly, as it's been spoken about tonight, today, this morning, the One Mitzvah campaign and how important and how powerful that is. So there's a letter that the previous Rebbe wrote to our Rebbe in the 30s when the Rebbe was yet living in Berlin. And the letter is about miracles. And there's an anecdote that the previous Rebbe shared with the Rebbe, I shouldn't say anecdote, a story, about a Jew whose name was Rebbe Leib. And this Rebbe Leib was a chassid during the times of the Alter Rebbe, for the purpose of ensuring that everyone here knows what we're talking about chronologically. The Alter Rebbe was born in Shnas Kahas, which is 1745, and he lived until 1812. The Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya and the Shulchan Aruch, the founder of Chabad. So the Alter Rebbe had this chassid Rebbe Leib, whom he had appointed to be the mashpia in this region, someplace that is referred to there as Turkish Mohilev, whatever that is. I think that's part of Belarus today. And he had young men with whom he would speak at Farbrengen and teach, and community that he would guide and lead, families he would guide and lead. And there were others there that were also part of the Jewish community. And Rebbe Leib was the leader of the Chabad portion, the Chabad segment of the community. And there was a young person there that became closer to Rebbe Leib and became closer to Chabad and to the teachings of Chabad. And he became one who lived according to the way that the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, instructed his Chassidim to live. He would daven at length, and he would participate in the various campaigns that would then be launched based upon the Alter Rebbe's desire to share Chassidus and to spread the teachings of Chassidus. And he had friends who were Chassidim of great Rebbes, of other groups, and they would talk. And during those times, one of the things that a Rebbe, a Chassidic Rebbe, was known for was to be a Baal Moifis, to be a miracle worker. So these other fellows would say to this young man, whose name we do not know, or at least it's not known to me, they would say to him that your Rebbe is a great Gaon, a great scholar. He's a wonderful, great scholar in every area, in every discipline of Torah. But if you need a miracle, you have to come to our Rebbe. So this was something that bothered this young man. It bothered him, and it's unclear to me what it is exactly that bothered him. Either it bothered him because he felt that maybe they're right, or because he felt that maybe it's some indicator of something that he felt that is not present in his Rebbe, whom he, as a chassid, and it's the truth, it's not just as a chassid, it's the truth. A Rebbe is a mushlam, a Rebbe is complete. But he didn't say anything to the Rebbe. He decided he's not going to say anything to the Rebbe, but it bothered him tremendously. Now the Rebbe would send a duch. A duch is a din v'cheshbon, an accounting that he would send to his Rebbe, to the Alter Rebbe, about his work that he was doing. And it's a very important nekuda, since we're on the subject, to write a duch, to write an nekuda, to write an accounting and send it to the Rebbe. However it is that you are preferring to send, you could send it to the Rebbe's oil. There's an office there. Those who don't know, there's oil@chabad.org, an email address that you could send, and it'll get placed into the Rebbe's oil without anybody reading it if you put confidential into the subject line. And the duch is important for the purpose of keeping the Rebbe informed and for the sake of accountability and for the sake of your own awareness of what you're achieving. So this Rebbe Leib would send a duch, he would send a list of the people with whom he had had anything to do. And he had mentioned this person's name, but he didn't have any idea that this person, this young man, was suffering from this issue, from this sense of some sort of feeling of pain. Then, in those times, mail wasn't like it is today. Oftentimes, letters were best transported by people that were traveling in that direction whom you knew, and then they would go ahead and they would bring it. So there was a shadar, a traveling shliach, who was traveling from the Alter Rebbe on his way to Eretz Yisrael. And on his way to the land of Israel, he stopped off by this Rebbe Leib, and he had an answer that the Alter Rebbe had given to the duch that Rebbe Leib had sent. And this young person's name was on the duch, or maybe who knows if it was or it wasn't, but the Alter Rebbe had written about him as follows. And if you look it up, it's printed in Hatamim, it's printed as well in, I believe, in the Friedrich of his letters. I think that the language there is that the Alter Rebbe instructed Rebbe Leib, which means it's appropriate to bring him close. We need to relieve his pain. For him, it'll be a sign, and for others, it'll be a miracle. So, Medindike answer. That seems that's clearly understood. He's in pain, we have to help him, we have to remove his pain. Loi, for this chassid, it'll be a sign, it'll be an indicator. It'll be an indicator of my relationship with him. The Alter Rebbe says to the Rebbe to tell this young man that this is an indicator that I am thinking of you, I know of your pain, and I know that you are needing my attention. And for you, it's a sign of my relationship with you, of my love for you. And this is something that we know, this is the way the Rebbeim are. The Chut HaMatavech, the connector between the Rebbe and the Chassid is love. So this Chassid needed to feel this sense of closeness. And for him, it was a sign that the Alter Rebbe and him are connected. And for anyone else that's there, it'll be a moifis. They'll say, oh, give a cook, a moifis. Alter Rebbe, how did he know? How did he know? Who told him? It's a moifis, it's a miracle. So I think it's very clear here that a person chooses what type of a relationship they want to have with the Rebbe. They want to have a relationship of ois or moifis. It's geschmack to have a moifis. Surely it's geschmack to have a moifis, no question. But then it's all about, the latest, what's on the show next. When it's an ois relationship, it takes a lot more effort. And indeed, this young man had to endure some pain to be able to experience the ois. And that's something that is very difficult to also swell, to say that that's the way to be. So how do you manage? So I think about this story a lot. And the reason is because, as I've just now mentioned, it seems like as if it's all about the young man. Is it ois or is it moifis? What am I here? But there's a third option. There's a third option that we can learn from this story that to me is so clearly powerful and truly the way, which is, I would love to be the young guy in the story. Of course, Dr. Rebbe to say to me, you're my man. But think about really Rebbe Leib for a minute. Wouldn't it be the best to be one who emulates Rebbe Leib, the one that is of service to the Jewish people, the one who the Alter Rebbe entrusted with the role of being a person who's guiding others, and the one who's dedicated to that to the point where he's ready to travel to this place that's far away. I'm not sure where he's from. It doesn't say where he was from in the letter that I read. And he's there out in this place, probably coming there without anybody knowing him or knowing of him or knowing what he was trying to achieve. It was the first generation of Chabad. He was there. It was brand new. And this Yid, the Rebbe Leib, is the person whom the Alter Rebbe gave the instructions to go be Mekad of this young man. So the Rebbe, in my little story of understanding, seems to want us to emulate Rebbe Leib, to find a way to be able to be the person who's of service to others. And of course, Rebbe Leib surely also had all the various kiruvim that he needed, also had all the various ways of being able to ensure that he felt connected to the Alter Rebbe. But the chassid who's of service to the Jewish people, through his relationship with the Rebbe, through the koiches that he has from the Rebbe, through the role that he feels is upon him. And I say chassid specifically because it has nothing to do with whether or not you are considered to be a shliach based upon the definition of shliach today, or if you feel that your role is a chassid. It's the role for everyone. It's a role for everyone. Everyone has the opportunity to be like this Rebbe, to be trusted by the Rebbe, to be given the role to be able to guide and steward young people or middle-aged people or old people. As I get older, it seems that youth gets bigger and bigger and bigger, towards being one who has a real relationship with the Eibishter by being a chassid of the Rebbe. But I have to share in the few minutes that's remaining, it's actually not so few, just 15, a few thoughts about this effort, because it does take work. It does take work, and it's an ongoing work. It's not an easy work, and it's one that everyone seems to, as you succeed, you have to succeed even more. You know, we speak about going out of the comfort zone. So the comfort zone is a place that you feel comfortable. So when you go out of the comfort zone, what happens next? The comfort zone expands. So whatever it was that was achieved, now to go beyond that requires a further step out of the comfort zone. And every one of us knows what that comfort zone is, because there's always opportunity. Everywhere you go, there's opportunity. When you walk down the street and you see someone whom you know or you don't know, sometimes in some places, there's so many people, that when you see another Jew, you don't even say Shalom Aleichem or even nod to them or say Good Shabbos or Good morning. And that's out of the comfort zone for some. For others, it's to pick up the phone and make a phone call and ask someone, hey, how you doing? Was machst du? Or ask someone to join you in some good thing and some good effort. But clearly the role of a chassid today is to break through that sort of divider. And the benefit of being of service, the reward for being of service is the opportunity to be able to be of service again, right? My very dear friend and mentor, and my father's very dear friend, Rabbi Moshe Yehuda Kowarski, would say that if the Rebbe, he says, if the Rebbe, how do you know if you succeed? If the Rebbe gives you another chance to do something else further after that, that means you succeeded in what you did before. So the greatest opportunity to be of service is the opportunity itself to be of service. But it's not something that comes easily, and oftentimes requires some measure of set aside, personal preference set aside. So there's a beautiful story that Rebbe told many times, and every mashpia that has ever tried to influence people in their way of thinking has told it, and it's been published numerous times. I'll tell it very briefly. That Rebbe told the story of a chassid that was going home from a Farbrengen in Russia, and he was feeling a certain sort of way where he didn't feel limitations, and he didn't feel that he has to be careful how he conducts himself. He can be free, he can be open. He's going in the street, and it's as a chassid is after a Farbrengen, and a Russian policeman hears this commotion of this Jew. And he asks, who goes there? In Russian, he goes, Toidat, who goes there? Who's there? So this chassid, without thinking, without answering, without sort of thinking, what's he going to answer? He's speaking to the Vorsteher of the Tsar. He's speaking to the representative of the Tsar. At night, in many cities, the police that's on the beat, the cop that's on the beat, he is the law. He says, Bittelgate. Bittel is going. Bittel means surrender, one who sets aside his personal preference. And now he is surrendered to the Eibishter, surrendered to God Almighty, in a way that's no longer about him and his koyach, his ability, what he can do, what he can't do, what he can achieve, what he can't achieve. It's about his being a conduit for the strength and the energy that the Eibishter, Almighty God, sends to him. As a chassid, we know that everything that we have, the Rebbe himself wrote this in a letter shortly after Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud, 1950. I believe it was on Gimel Tammuz Tavshin Yud Aleph, maybe it was Tavshin Yud, I can't recall. That everything that we have, Gashmi and Ruchi, all things that we have, physically, materially, spiritually, everything that we have comes from and through the Rebbe. So in order to be able to set aside, one has to set aside. One has to be able to set aside one's koyach, one's personal preference rather, to be able to be meriting to receive the koyach that comes through being a chassid, of the Rebbe, that then gives us the ability to be able to truly capture and harness the strength of the Eibishter. So Rabbi Yoel Khan, whom we all have a debt of gratitude to. Rabbi Yoel Khan was the chief redactor of the Rebbe's talks, and much of what we study today is because of his work that he was able to help us have it in such a format. Rabbi Yoel Khan would tell this story, and he would add that the story is a beautiful story, but there's another piece of the story, which is that there was another guy there. And after this chassid made this very well-known answer, Bittelidot, he said to him, Bittel euch nit. Bittel also not. What does that mean? Bittel also not. Because when a person says, I am Bottle, you know who I am? I'm Bottle. then he's already given himself some status that's not bottom. So if a chassid seeks to be of service to the Jewish people by being a chassid to the Rebbe and thereby be able to capture the koyach of the Eibishter, he seeks to do so in a way where he surrenders his own preference to the point where he doesn't even recognize as being one who surrenders his own preference. It's an avodah, it's an avodah, it's an avodah. But you know what, I'll tell you this, you don't have to be meaning it sincerely to be able to do it. One of the things that we learned from the Alter Rebbe and Tanya is that what matters the most is how we experience life. Thought, speech, and deed. The Gimel Levushim, right? The three garments of the soul. What we think, what we say, and what we do. If we're truly, truly sincere to the depths of our souls, is a great thing to be. But not everyone can be truly so sincere. But everybody could be able to manage to at some level control their thought, their speech, and their deed. So sometimes if you have an opportunity to be of service and it seems like it's not such an easy thing to do, put yourself into that situation. Pick up the phone and make the call. Walk through the door. Say hello to the person. Open the conversation. Ask them if they want to do something. Ask them if they want to put on tefillin. The moment you engage, the comfort zone expands, and then it's no longer out of your comfort zone. It's no longer out of your comfort zone. And even though maybe in truth within you is a certain sense of trepidation, but thought, speech, and deed have been harnessed for the purpose of being of service to the Jewish people. That's what matters. That's what matters. That's what matters. So since it's these times, coming from Chav Ches Nisan to Gimel to Beis Iyar, the Rebbe Marash's birthday, Rebbe Marash's birthday is Beis Iyar coming up. So the idea of out of the comfort zone, I think, is very aligned with these sorts of with these times. And I'll share this with you. I'll share this with you in these last few minutes. That sometimes people that go out of their comfort zone don't know it, and others that see them are impressed, and it makes a difference. And the Rebbe told the story of a Bostonian. Now, Boston is a city in Massachusetts. I was born and raised in a place called Worcester, Massachusetts, not too far from Boston. And people in Boston are fans of the Red Sox, but that's not negated to this Farbrengen. But anyway, the point of the matter is that there was a Bostonian that was walking in the street, and he looked like a Chassidish Yid, a Chassidish Bacher. He had a beautiful beard, payas, tzitzis. So someone that was there, a Bostonian, a shopkeeper, saw this yeshiva bacher. So he asks the guy, he says, "From wann kommt der Yid? From Poland, from Galicia, from Ukraine, from wann kommt der Yid? Where's the Jew from? From Poland, from Galicia, from Ukraine." So the fellow answered him with a very clean American Massachusetts accent. He said to him, "I'm a Bostonian." So this fellow was so impressed that here it is, a Jew that looks like this, that he's from Boston. Says the Rebbe when he told the story that likely the next person that came to this guy for a donation got a bigger donation. But the word is that this fellow, this Bostonian comfort zone had expanded to the point where he didn't even realize that what he was doing was out of the comfort zone. He was so accustomed to it. He was walking down the street. He was doing his thing. He was doing his thing. So when we put ourselves into the work, certain things happen that we don't even know. And the Rebbe, when he told the story, said this Bostonian guy doesn't even know till today what he's achieved with this fellow, that he had somehow so impressed with his ability to be able to achieve this. So I'll share this with you in the last 6 minutes of this presentation. I'll share with you hopefully 3 small points, not small in stature and in meaning, but small in time, that I think about during these days between Chav Ches and Beis. And the Rebbe told the story of the Chavetz Chaim. Chavetz Chaim's name was Yisrael Meir HaKohen Kagan. And of course, we're all aware of his being the Chavetz Chaim is because of his work, his book that he had written, amongst other Svarim, Shtagruda, etc. Chavetz Chaim passed away, I think, in 1933. He was already 90 plus years old. So there was a situation whereby there was an effort to try to undermine Jewish life by changing certain rituals, making them, so to speak, illegal at the time. Chavetz Chaim lived in Radim, which is, today it's in Belarus, then it was part of Russia, presumably. So there was a delegation that had gone to try to speak to a minister to try to change the situation somehow. And on the way back, they stopped in Radin and they gave a report to the Chavetz Chaim that they did not succeed. And they gave really good reasons why they didn't succeed, legitimate reasons. So the Rebbe told the story. And the Rebbe told the story, the Chavetz Chaim looked at them and he said to them, he said, did you chalish? Did you faint? Did one of you faint when you spoke to him? If the matter would have really been important to you, you would have fainted when you spoke to him. When the Rebbe spoke these words, he said it with a lot of emotion. And I heard the recording so many times. The Rebbe said, "Du gechalish wenn du es geredet mit dem? Ey, die Sache gewinnt dir nicht geos, da chalischen wenn du das mit dem. Hat mit von euch gechalisht?" That's the comfort zone that we have to break through. The breakthrough comfort zone means it has to matter to us. And when it matters to us, then we're able to be, indeed, the Rebbe's chassid, the Rebbe's servant, the way that the Rebbe can make use of us. And truly so. Like Reb Leib, like so many others over the course of these last hundreds of years, for all of the 7 Rabbeim. And during these times, for our beloved Rebbe, so many thousands of Yidden are shluchim and chassidishim belait, chassidishim mishpachas, and chassidishim women that are seeking to be of service to others, and mean it so whereby the taka is meaningful to them. Baruch Hashem, nobody should chalish, but should mean it in such an way where they feel that way. Then I'd like to share with you this, and that is that our family, Isaiah was Yechid and Gordon. So there's a letter that was sent to him by the previous Rebbe's maskir, as well as a member of the Anhola of Temchit Mimim. His name was Cheskel Fagin, Chacha Fagin. He was killed al Kiddush Hashem by the Nazis in Machshemon. So Cheskel Fagin wrote a letter to my Zayda, in which he said to him, he said, Yochanan, write to the Rebbe, to the Frierdiker Rebbe, tell him about what's going on in your family. And then he said, do you remember the situation, the scene that we both witnessed when we were together by the Farbrengen, by the court of the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Lubavitch Rebbe? And there was a chassid there who was aroused. He was in a state of isachshus. He was emotional. He was awakened. He wanted to become better. And he said to the Rebbe Rashab, to the 5th Lubavitch Rebbe, he said to him, Rebbe, he said, Hat min in Zinnen, have me in mind, which is really the very smart thing to do. You want the Rebbe to think about you. Who doesn't want that? And the Rebbe Rashab answered him, how to do me in heartsman, which means you should have me in your heart. You should have me in your heart, which means that there's nothing wrong with asking the Rebbe to have you in mind. But what does the Rebbe seek? The Rebbe seeks that you should have him in your heart. Having him in your heart means it's an emotional relationship. It's permeating. It's not only intellectual. It's not only what makes sense. It's beyond what makes sense. It's in a way where by now, it's not just about how I can make this work for me, my preference. It's about what's right and what needs to be done. It's about being out of the comfort zone. Bittul euch nit. And to conclude with a line that I heard from Rabbi Herschel Fogelman, Olah Shalom, the Rebbe Shliach to Worcester, Massachusetts, where my father was a Shliach as well for many years and where I was born. Rabbi Fogelman, after Chav Zayin Oder, so my friend Mati, Rabbi Fogelman's son, and I, we called up Rabbi Fogelman and we said to him, Rabbi Fogelman, what's going to be? What's going to be now? And he said, Weniger trachten und mehr tun. Weniger reden und mehr tun. Less thinking and more deed, more action. Less talk and more deed, more action. And that's the answer. And that's the word. And with that, we're going to be able to make sure that Mashiach comes and we will be ready to be Mekabel Pnei Mashiach Tkenu, Korib Mamish. He come immediately now without even a moment, like the Rebbe would say, V'lo yikfon afilu keheref ayin. It shouldn't be delayed the amount that it takes to blink an eye. L'chaim.
Rabbi Gordon, may the Eibishter bless you to continue to inspire the masses wherever you go, wherever you're traveling, whatever you do, whenever you're called upon, from strength to strength, with the Rebbe's keiches, as you say.
Hope to live up to your l'chaim. It's a work in progress, l'chaim.
In Europe, things are very different in the afternoon. So you, Rabbi Gordon, in the beginning mentioned regarding bringing people to the Rebbe, or writing to the Rebbe, whatever platform you might use. I just want to share a little story that happened this Thursday night. Over the past couple of years, Zoom became very fashionable, and post-COVID, wherever you are in the world, but at least our Thursday night Zoom in the community, Thursday Night Live continues. As a member of the community, for years, I tried to bring somehow to Crown Heights, to the Eil, etc., to the Rebbe. And this Thursday night, he has moved since to the States and lives in Texas. He's traveling back for Pesach. And he jumps onto the Zoom Thursday night. Lo and behold, before I know it, he opens up his camera and he's standing in front of the Eil. And he walks into the Eil. You know, you make all kinds of achanas, you prepare, you try to bring people. And there we are, about a dozen or so people. Before we knew it, we were in the Eil. Virtually, all a bit, but we were there. So of course, the rest of the Zoom took a different course, and we took a moment and recognized where we were, and it was very awesome. But just sharing this point, because first of all, as the person called me right after and said, you know, the only reason why I'm here today and we're in New York is to take my kid to Yeshiva University, he's taking a sabbatical to Mayanot, etc., is only because of the Rebbe being able to become close to Yiddishkeit. When they moved out here to Europe, it was a very different story. But my point is, going back to this one mitzvah platform, this was on Zoom, and this was just by a click of a phone, and all of a sudden, there was a bunch of more people that had the opportunity to engage on a much deeper level. Don't underestimate, and you never know who it's going to come from. As long as we just do our little bit, continue to light those little fires, the Rebbe will take care of everything else. The video clip dealing with the battle of the generation, perhaps our generation, right before Rabbi Nemes will take the floor. The Rebbe.
Oder bin in a signen Acher, a Bishas hat gerät hat die Siche, Jeschleimer, der Mutter gewähnt, der Mami du Matze, am hat gekonnt auflegen die Schliefes. Ab der Mispor von Nieden, wo sie haben sich gefunden in jene Mami du Matze und in Dit Neu und in der Mefen Alimud, danach hat es gesehen, bepeil in der delische Lachrise, was ist sage, sie gewähnt verbunden mit Golus, was mir gedacht hat, wegen von Libavisch und dann noch sich mispaschelt gewähnt, bekamen mit Chemis, nicht nur in den Nord, nur bekamen mit Chemis. Und dann noch ist das Eche tiefer gegangen zu die, wo sie sagen, mit zu Rosbi, in Avidosa Machizenis, als Ziel von Balabatim, und man sich angesagt, dass sie davon werden, Neres Lehoi. Bis war nicht wie der Mond in der Siche Gufe, was sich in Kommer gedruckt, hat gleich geredet, dass es seien zwei Deles. Was heißt, wenn Melchemes besowit, werde noch der Linie von Cheil von Ikwes Mishicheche. Und Farderuf ist in dort die, was sie welche Hawaii, der Dorsche Liefnisse, was hat damals dieser Heimkehren mit der ganzen Dorf, von der Werk und einkehren sich mit dem Dorf Schäne, von Cheil von Ikwes Mishicheche, wird tatscht das auf in der Siche, aber das bei Ikwes der Mishiche Mamosch, darf man haben am ganzen Dorf. Alle Jeden, was einen bedeutet. Bekommen, bepasst meint man das, aber es soll gefühlt jeder Ried, mit welchem man kommt in Verbindung, darf man wissen sein, dass alle Unionen, was sehr während der Liebe darauf trefft sich mit dem, ist das so wichtig, dass der Rieke. Was aber ein Dover Borur ist, als darf man dem Mieden auftun in der Mine von der Fotzes Majones Chutzo, warum das in dem Milchemes bis David bei Yameinu Ebel, Cheich vor Ikwes Mishicheche, auf mit dem Milchome haben, Tage bedarke Nehm und bedarke Scholem, aber in der Nähe von Milchome, was bei Milchome spassen darauf in Rambam, bei Ruchu, bei Pashtus, am Torne sein, ki Jore v'racha levo. Bemele Tore nicht trachten wegen Sakones am Milchome. Damit ist Konne sich bringen, auf zu ewig sein, auf ein Zivui, von was mit Torne sein, ki Jore v'racha levo. Darf Tage gehen, bedarke Nehm und bedarke Scholem, aber nicht bleiben sitzen bei sich in seine Dalle Dame ist auch viel, wenn das in Lubavitch, was mit Mondbeam, also Gehares in dem Chutzo, wo sie gefühlt sich hat die von Cheil von Ikwes Mishichecho und dort Mefi sein die Mariones, bemerle wir sein Kosi Mar Dom Malki Mishiche, wird sie Ikwes Mishichecho, wird der Herr der Ikwes Mischiach zit keine Bepashtus und mit jenem Mekabel Ponim sein mit sich Simcha Betur Levo und Binoreinu Biskeneinu und Bibaneinu Bibniseinu a Keneinu Neinzika Ried wird nicht bleiben in Golus und mit Tufto, mit jeder Rieden und mit alle Rieden a jeder von sie soll reisgen in Milchemes bis David und es a sichere Sache mit Menazeich sein. Wegen David Melech Israel Chai Vikayom und sie wird sein bei Gole die Dan, mit Yad Heini Golim, ki Psag Din Rambam, bi Gula Hamitis Vashlemo, alle Dei Meshiach Zitkenu, David Malke Mishich,
Amen. No question, those words were said in 1985. The ring as strong today as it did then. With no further ado, Rabbi Yossi Nemes, Shliach in New Orleans, Louisiana. I thought Europe was far, but I mean, this is another whole level. A giant in his own right, and privileged to be here with you. Rabbi Nemes.
Thank you very much, Michal. L'chaim, everyone. L'chaim, good chodesh. L'chaim. We're here at 7:30 in the morning here. I have Shachris at 8 o'clock, so we'll say L'chaim again. There was a story going around in my youth, and I've never verified it, that there was some activist, a person well-intentioned, and he thought that the solution to bring the solution to all the problems in America is to bring all the great Orthodox Jewish leaders from Lakewood and Rabbi Soloveitchik and his modern Orthodox stream and the Chassidish Rebbes and the Rebbe and the Satmar Rebbe, to bring them all together in the room for a meeting. So they say that when this person came to Rabbi Soloveitchik about his idea of bringing all of them, to one room for a meeting, Rabbi Soloveitchik smiled and said, "Are you trying to bring on World War III?" And when the idea was brought to the Rebbe smiled and said, "Are you trying to usher in Yemei Mashiach?" 3 years ago, thank you, Rabbi Gordon, by the way, you really transported us to a beautiful place, and with practical achlotis, I'm going to talk a little bit about the present, based on the Sikha after the famous Sikha in Purim Tavshim Mem Zayin. I'll get to that in a second. 3 years ago, Gimel Tammuz was on Shabbos, the 25th Gimel Tammuz. That was my role and my responsibility to be in my Chabad house for Shabbos, to lead, facilitate a Farbrengen for Gimel Tammuz. So Thursday morning, I went to travel to New York. I was by the aisle all day. And at night, I came to 770. My flight had to leave to the airport 4:30 in the morning on Friday. So Baruch Hashem, at 2 o'clock in the morning, finally a Farbrengen formed the 770 with Rabbi Shalom Ber Levittin from Seattle. And we were sitting a group of guys the night before the 25th Gimel Tammuz, and there was a feeling of gaguyim, a feeling of frustration. 25 years Adayin Lein Neshanu. And Rabbi Levittin picked up on something. He said, I understand all these feelings, they're very appropriate, but I'm getting the feeling as you're all sitting here and you throw up your hands and meknechshit as if you're helpless bystanders. And then for 2 hours I take a pump in the neshama. Do you believe what the Rambam says, and more importantly, what the Rebbe says needs to be in front of us 24 hours a day today, that your next act or your next words or your next thought can bring Yeshua v'atzal l'chalayim, literally. So it's fine to have these gaguyim, but it's in your hands. Pshutik mashmai, we can bring the Rebbe back and we can bring Mashiach. So that Farbrengen left a very strong impression on me, and so therefore I'm going to share a little bit from the Farbrengen of Purim Tavshim Mem Zayin. That Farbrengen in Purim Tavshim Mem Zayin really had very similar language to Chav Ches Nissen Tavshim Nun Aleph. In a way, you can say it was the beginning of the Rebbe passing on or making us aware in very clear terms that it's our responsibility, it's our role. We're going to be the ones to bring Mashiach. And obviously, Chav Ches Nissen had its own very unique intensity. And since a lot of people have already spoken about the Farbrengen of Purim Tavshim Mem Zayin, and by the way, somebody sent me a link that on Friday to the Hebrew COL, that on Thursday night there was a sif of the Bachim Tamimim in Eretz Yisrael, and they had some videos, the highlight of this, which are on the web, beautifully discussing and treating the Sikha of Purim Tovshim Mem Zayin and the background and the impact it had and the similarities to Chav Ches Nisan. So I'll just point out, and you can go online over there, you'll see it really, really transports you to that Sikha and brings out this idea of the Rebbe giving over to us to bring Mashiach. So I'm just going to bring a couple of Nakudas that the Rebbe said that night. One Akdama, I was on last night for a little bit, and everybody's been really, really inspiring and coming from different perspectives, and very often with achlotas to take home. One of the things that were mentioned last night a lot is the idea that the Rebbe made us Chav Ches Nisan, Purim Mem Zayin, and many other times, that it's in our hands, that we are the influencers. We should know very clearly that we, every single one of us, are Nashim V'Taf, are the influencers. So stop this whole subject of influencers. The only two cameras I see on are people who don't live in America. So I don't know if it's in the whole world this way, but in America, there's a fascination with the idea of influencers. And ich nicht zu viel verstanden them, aber ich habe meine Kinder, who are a little bit more behavent in the sugya of influencers. And they were masbid to me, they explained to me that there's been a radical change in who has influence. It used to be people that have money. People that have money still have a lot of influence. But Lamashal celebrities, actors, sports stars, they were considered the influencers, the greatest influencers in society. And today, even if celebrity has 1 million followers on Twitter or they have on Instagram, they're only they're half influencers. The greatest influencers are the ones, people we don't know their names, individuals, young people, sitting by a computer and pressing a few buttons, taking a video from here and putting it in this important place at the time, or writing short posts and having the ability to affect change on societies, on countries. The greatest influencers are people we don't know, young people that are sitting pressing buttons. So interesting, on Yud Shvat Tavshim Mem Vav, the Rebbe spoke about the halacha in the Rambam, that you should always look at the whole world balance between merit and the opposite of merit, and your own situation balanced between schus and the opposite of schus. And your next act, and the Rebbe always added, and your next word that you're going to say, your next thought can bring salvation and redemption to the world. So the Rebbe said it's a very radical idea that our one small thought or act will bring geula to the whole world. It doesn't seem something that can resonate with us. So the Rebbe said in the last generations, once we had the splitting in the atom and nuclear weapons and so on, the Rebbe said we're afraid, people are afraid, and today that's something that everybody's talking about, that one bad person can press a button and chas v'shalom destroy a city or a medina. And the emes says it doesn't have to be that bad person. If that device came to a child, all the child would have to do is press that button because of everything that it's wired into, and they can make a churban in the whole world. And we know, of course, no question that the power of positive is stronger than the power of negative. Meruba midateva. So now we could picture that our next act, even a Maisa Katan, it can be a small act, pressing a button, can influence and change the whole world. And that's what we're seeing today. The people who are influencing, changing the world, setting the whole agenda are people that are sitting and doing a few clicks. And I was pointing out last night, the idea of these sikhs is that we are the influencers, each and every one of us, to bring Mashiach. That Farbrengen, the Rebbe began that Farbrengen saying that the subject matters, the noisim by the Farbrengens have changed over the years. In the early years of Deir Shvi, not the Rebbe's words, but my words, and in the Farbrengens of Rabbi Sein Nesienu before, and in general, by Gdei Yisrael, from time to time, they would mention Geula and Mashiach, mention it as an important thing, foundation of our faith. But the idea that by every Farbrengen, that's what was spoken about, and as a central foundational idea, that was not until recently, including this halacha from Hilchos Shuvah, chapter 3. It's a Gemara in Kedushin, it's halacha in the Rambam, and nevertheless, only from time to time it was mentioned. and as one of the many things that were mentioned. But lately, we mentioned it as something that has to be front and center in front of us as right now to know this in. And it's because, of course, that Mashiach is closer. It's Ikvis in the Mashiach. We're on the doorstep of Mashiach. This is the time we're in. This is the call of the hour that the ideas of Mashiach and Gula should be front and center, and the emphasis and the foundation, and including this halacha, and especially this halacha that we for ourselves should constantly have in our consciousness, that our next act or speech or word or thought can be the tipping point to bring the world to Gula. And also we should be, every time there's a gathering, we should say, Yidden, listen, Yidden, listen, your next act, each individual, the Rebbe pointed out, und he and she, each and every individual man and woman, and then he pointed out a child, because the Rambam says, Maisa, action, and a child, his machshav is not significant in halacha, but his action is. He can press that button. Because now it's important. And by the way, this shtickle chiddush, it's one thing you say general about things of Mashiach and Geula. There's different things that are emphasized. By the way, with Beis Zir coming up, until the Rebbe's Nesius, you don't hear the story of the Chatchila Rebbe except one time in the Friedrich Rebbe's letter. As a matter of fact, the Rebbe wrote a Sefer HaTeldus of the Rebbe Marash in America. The Chayv of the Friedrich Rebbe, the story of the Chatchila Rebbe, the Vart of the Chatchila Rebbe is not mentioned. Came Deir Shvi, it's in every Sikha and every Farbrengen, the Rebbe Marash's Nigin is named the Chatchila Rebbe and so on. And the same thing with Inyani Mashiach Gula, now is the time. But this is a big chiddush. This is a halacha. The Rebbe would always be medayik, precise where the halacha is. It's not a halacha at the end of Hilchos Malachim. It's not a halacha at the end of Hilchos Tshuva that talks about the days of Mashiach. It's halacha in the part of Hilchos Tshuva that's talking about how we have to perceive ourselves every day and how we have to be inspired every day, and especially during a sense to make tshuva. And nevertheless, until 1987, it wasn't emphasized constantly, and now it's constantly has to be on our focus. The Rebbe continued the Farbrengen, talking about Sheva Mitzvahs and the tremendous change that there's been, that we know that we weren't involved in Sheva Mitzvahs because it was too dangerous. And today, the non-Jew gives you a Yashakeach, helps you if you share with him Sheva Mitzvahs. But despite all these changes that the world has come along, that the world is a more refined place, Mashiach hasn't come. And despite all the kitzin, throughout all the generations, and even we should notice that the Rebbe Rashab gave a ketz. This is Purim Tavshim Zayin. The Rebbe continued in Tafrish Samach Vav was a ketz. And then the Avui in the Kul of us is that the Friedrich Rebbe in Tafshin Gimel and Tafshin Dalid directed that we should announce and proclaim and print, and something that's print is for generations, that La'al Til Tshuva, La'al Til Gula. And he did this at tremendous cost and sacrifice. There's very unusual language about that. And nevertheless, he insisted that it should be announced, it should be publicized. And nevertheless, decades have passed. Mashiach is not here. And I've been searching and searching for some explanation as to what's going on and what can be done. Till I realized, possible, the only explanation is that being that a Nasi Akel, the Nasi is everyone in the generation. The idea is that the bring of Mashiach has to be passed on from the Nasi to each and every person in the generation. Each man and each woman and each child as individuals, not just as a klal, the Hakel. Each individual in the Hakel. And each and every one of us has to be involved. And as I mentioned, that it's dependent on us. And now that each individual, the Hakel, in other words, till now, the Hakel was hoping to bring Mashiach through the Nasi. And now the Nasi wants to bring Mashiach through. Is the way Mashiach is going to be brought is dafke through the Hakel, through each and every person. There's very clear language over there, very similar to Chavches Nissen. And he says, and therefore now that it's up to each and every one, every man and woman and child that has to bring Mashiach. So you have to know that your next act is not just a general inspiration. It means each and every one of you. It means in your next act and your next speech and your next thought. In the next sikha, and this sikha is already much talked about, including in this very Farbrengen, By the way, and coming up in the second video, coming up in the video in another few minutes, will be a continuation. Anyway, in the second sikha, the Rebbe talks about that Daniel says that Yizbaru, V'Yislabnu, V'Yitztar for Arabim, that before Mashiach comes, things will come to fore, both for good and the opposite of good that were previously hidden or latent. And the good comes to the fore because it's a sign of Mashiach. And the negative is also a sign of Mashiach because it gives us the ability to be able to fix. Well, as long as something is latent or hidden, you don't know about it. When it comes to the fore, even if it's negative, it's a blessing because you can correct it. And the Rebbe gives two examples, Latav, and two examples, Lamutav. In the negative, the Rebbe says there's wars going on that we weren't Mashayar, that these wars could be happening. And the reason why we're not totally focused on it because they're far off lands. We all understand today, we're talking about two Western countries very much in everyone's consciousness with very large Jewish communities. Some of the crown jewels of Lubavitch and Chassidus and Chabad and Shluchis is in Ukraine and Russia. And the Eibishter Shataka bench the Shluchim and the Yidden and the general countries in not only Ukraine, but the Shluchim in Russia also for a big bracha in this situation.
Amen.
The second thing that I've mentioned, Lamutav, is about Machlekes. Tavshem Mem Zayin, not something we want to elaborate. It was a year of Lav Dafke Shalom. And the Rebbe said people who you wouldn't think are controversial are suddenly involved in Machlekes. So it's an opportunity to correct this. So Baruch Hashem, in Lubavitch, we know now that especially the last few years, the last 20 years, and especially Lacharena, and especially with the initiative after our Chaver Benny Wolf passed away, his second yahrzeit coming up, that there's a tremendous achdus between shluchim in each place and shluchim in adjacent places, and anash in each community, and shluchim and anash, and whatever vestige, and a lot of nachas ruach the Rebbe has, the matzav is mamish, in my opinion. I'm not the Barditchever by nature. The matzav is Baruch Hashem and nachas ruach, and whatever vestige there is will certainly be corrected. And then the Rebbe comes to the two positive things that have recently come to light. One is the Rebbe says about tzedakah with a very interesting expression that the Yidden have a tradition of giving tzedakah. We're a very charitable people. It's the mitzvah. And especially in America is a very strong tradition of philanthropy. Afal became no one was able to foresee the type of tzedakah, the giving, the absolute giving with an open hand that we're seeing lately in tzedakah. What's our situation today? The Indian of tzedakah is unbelievably prevalent in the Jewish world, in the Frum world, and in the Anash world, where the Rebbe has brought us. This whole idea of these charity campaigns, I know some of them are, the text and reminders are getting a little bit of kirchena b'salamol, but the fact is that if you look at these campaigns, in addition to the big givers, it's half of it is Anash. It's almost like the in the Gersa Kedesh, the Alter Rebbe talks about Hakel Fireva Maisa, to give often. It should be, as the Rebbe would say, a yada mechaleket tzedakah, a hand that's constantly giving. Our computer, with the click of a button, that has already our information. Every day we're giving $36, $72, $100, $54. Pasha, the computer a mechaleket tzedakah with one maisa echad. It's a tremendous nachas ruach. A shliach told me, who's a shliach in a place that's very popular now for people to move to, Alderich, Florida. And all kinds of people are moving there. And a lot of young anash of all kinds. And he tells me you can tell all the Jewish people are into tzedakah, but you can tell who a Lubavitcher is just by the tzedakah. And lav dafke, the ones who are running around with the Lakutasichis or running a Mifsayim, even the Lubavitchers that might not be their thing, or are working on it still. He says that what the Rebbe engraved in us of helping other people and giving tzedakah biyad rechava, he sees it in an unbelievable manner. The tzedakah of these young business people in Lubavitch is just unprecedented. That was one thing that Rebbe mentioned. The second thing that Rebbe mentioned that day I want to mention, by the way, talk about living in the times of Mashiach. There's an initiative among shluchim, and it's a lot of shluchim. And it's not something that's sparsome. Obviously, it's any pnimi among shluchim, that new donations that they receive that we didn't receive in past years, or a major increase that you weren't expecting, or somebody comes to your Chabaras for Shul and he does Chabaras for Shabbos and he doesn't leave $180, he leaves $1,500. That happened to me a month ago. So it's like a dover that's a pella, So and if you have other sources of income, when new or unexpected income comes in, that we share 10% with other shluchim. And thousands of dollars are being shared every week. And it's a Mashiach's way of living without any fanfare, without any, it's a davar pashut. If the donation wasn't designated for a certain thing, that can move in as one thing, but somebody gave it to us to do as we understand what's important for our meiser, that all meisters should be healthy as well as important. And if you get a new donation, you share 10%. And this is what the Rebbe achieved with tzedakah and sharing and giving. The last thing that the Rebbe said that they l'teiv is that in limud HaTorah, there's a new way, chidushim and insights that are unprecedented. It's a be'en hareich of the way of learning Torah until now. And some people are makashet plainly, the Rebbe said. But we have it, the Isbar of Islam, what's come to the fore is, for example, the teachings of the Ragachover. And the Rebbe goes on to speak to the Ragachover for a few minutes. Now, his unique style, and the Rebbe says, it's nothing to discuss. Nobody can really have a discussion with you. The Rebbe says, when it comes to the way the Ragachover ate or drank or slept or spaziert, so he was very medactic, everything was according to halacha, but you don't see something that totally distinguishes him in a different league. But when it comes to his approach to Torah study and Chidushim Torah study, it's in a different world. And we were zeichet it now, before Mashiach comes, it's come to the forefront. It's very hard to understand. I mean, the Ragachover passed away in Tafresh Tzadik Vav in 1936, 7 yees before La'al Tel Tshuva, La'al Tel Gula. The Rebbe is trying to convince us now that 30 years after the Frierdiker Rebbe's proclamation, La'al Tel Tshuva, La'al Tel Gula, now we're really before the Gula. What's missing is just that each and every one of us should realize it's our inheritance, that our next thought, our next speech and action. And the Rebbe is talking about the Ragachover's Chidushim, which is for the previous generations. I'm going to give a quick speculation, but before that, I want to point out something that's very interesting. The Igris Kedesh, for those who are young, you should know that until Purim Tavshin Mem Zayin, we did not have something called the Igris Kedesh. We had the Sichos, Mamorim. The Rebbe's letters were printed in the back of the Sichos as a suffix. 2 days after the Rebbe said, there's now a phase of emphasis that it's being passed on from the Nasi to Koladar. And every person has to know that their next act is significant. Their next thing that they say or think. The Rebbe received a packet from Vad Lefatzasichas of letters from Maskidus, from Rabbi Simpson, to ask if they can give the copies of Maskidus to the Talmud Sichas and they can print it. And the Rebbe instead passed it on to Rabbi Levin. Purim Farbrengen Mem Zayin was Sunday night. This was Tuesday. Passed it on to Rabbi Levin and said that he basically came out that he wants a separate series called Igros Kedesh, that the letters and everything we have from Igros Kedesh, with the people who read 2-3 Igros every day, and we just had 30 Igros in 30 days, and all the Chalukas, and the Igros Kedesh is the waters from this which we all live in many different ways. That started Mamish Purim Tavshim Zayin in that era when the beginning of Chav Ches Nisan started, because now we need Kol HaTshuvas to Kol HaShailas, as the Alter Rebbe says. So just about the Ragachover, I mean, maybe the Rebbe is obviously, it's kind of obvious the Rebbe is talking about himself as the continuance of the Ragachover's ways. I only have 2 minutes left. So very briefly, when the Igros Kedesh were being printed, and that was happening at that time, the first letter in Igros Kedesh is a letter from the Rebbe to Ragachover at age 25, where the Rebbe writes to Ragachover, I received your letter in response to my letter. Later on in the Miluyim in volume 21, there's a letter when the Rebbe was 22 from Yekaterinoslav, on the Mityagarari's name, where the Rebbe writes to Ragachover also, I received your letter in response to your letter, that it's come to the fore now with the Igros being printed, that the whole world could know that there's plainly that the Rebbe is the Mamshech Darkei of the Ragachover, with a way of learning and deciphering Torah and Chidushim in a way that's unprecedented preparation for Mashiach. The 1 minute left for Achlotis. I want to say that like 10 years ago, I made a resolution to learn in Yoni Mashiach Gula. I used Rabbi Galitzky's Yemeis HaMashiach Ba'alacha, first the first volume, then the second volume a few years later. And really, it's an encyclopedia about Yoni Mashiach, very easy to read. I used to give over almost every day between Mincha and Ma'ariv a vart from there. And then, of course, you have these things that Tut Alts did. Definitely learned these sichos the way I'm very helped by these sichos that are with all the aids and that help you learn the sichos. And the last thing is a big Aseirus, the one mitzvah So one of the things we did here, in addition to the shluchim for May of Esrim Shana, making a chlota to reach out to people that come from time to time to Chabad to get them to do a mitzvah, we're having the people in our Chabad combined collectively to get 120 people that they're going to influence in Torah mitzvahs. And when I spoke about it, we're starting to implement it now. But when I spoke about it, Shabbos before you off this, and just speaking about it, a man stood up and said, "I'm buying mezuzahs for my brother's house," or he came over to me after davening. And then when I mentioned that my brother in Florida put a pair of tefillin in his store with a sign that whoever wants to put in his business, whoever wants to put on tefillin in Hebrew and English, put on tefillin. Somebody actually got up. That was actually got up on the second day of Pesach. I mentioned the story, and he said he's going to sponsor a pair of tefillin for the local store if the person agrees to have the tefillin with the sign up that anyone can put on tefillin in the store with a tefillin b'shor and other b'shors. And that tefillin has been ordered. The store has agreed, and we can all bring millions and millions of new mitzvahs and bring Mashiach now. B'mheira v'yameinu mamash. Thank you again to the organizers. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'vracha.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Nemes. And we see you mean business and tachlis. Your desk behind you is ready for Mashiach's coming with the yayin all ready and the boxes loaded up. Maybe we get together. Leading us. Amen. ASAP. And Shakayach for the Hartzak Everter. I just want to take a moment talking about the One Mitzvah campaign and the click of the mouse. I think Rabbi Nemes hit the nail on the head. The opportunity we all have. There's some of us here on Zoom, but there's thousands across the world participating on various different platforms, including YouTube, and the link is in the chat there. So if everybody could just take 30 seconds and go to the chat box on the right here in the Zoom or wherever you might be following, whichever platform, and just copy and paste it into one of your groups or even to just one other individual, and let's get this message. I mean, it's so valuable and so powerful and so beautiful, pearls of wisdom that we're hearing and inspiration to continue sharing that on. And as Rabbi Nemes mentioned, we're going to go to a clip of a sikha from that actual Purim in 1987, Tavshim Mem Zayin.
Noch gekommen ist sie der Rein und gemacht eine ganze Stunde von Lealter, Lichuve, Lealter, Ligiule. Und das ist gemacht, kommen bedient mit der Stunde. Und als es geheißen, Nordrücken, geheißen, Mefi sein und gab der Fall die Schwierigkeiten, was man mit dem Mann gemacht. Und nachfolgend ist dann noch umgegangen, der Winter, als es geheißen, Nordrücken, gedeiht, er soll bleiben, man soll das lernen, la der ist Haboi machen. Steht das mit dem ganzen Teke. Bei mir wird sich noch stürender die Scheilat Moser. Und wie fragt das redet sich wegen einer Käse von der Sidereine. Und sind jenen Käse schon durchgegangen, sämtliche Jahre. Und gezurückt, wo ich da fort etwas an Bio, das war der einzige Bio, was ich gefunden habe, Israel, das ein Scheich ist, von Hanossi, Hu Hakel, darf das Sieber gehen zu Hakel, darf das Sieber geben zu jeder Rieden bifnei Atzme. Pschaße gewähren an Nossi, Hu Hakel und alle seien dann gewähren übergegeben für Chulu, hat nicht gekonnt, damit Jeze sein. Und nachfall Pekin hat das nicht gebracht, den Befehl. Befall, Beschaße geworden, die Rides Adelis. Achscher dort biet mir. Und zusammen der Miete ist aber geworden, nennt zu dem Miete und zu dem Achischeno, wer Mewai Baruch in Scheire Heere in Sof und Drusche Purim, ist auch damals geworden, noch mehr der Hechlich, aber man muss ihn drauf tun. Nur wenn der mir sagt, habe ich Chance, wegen drauf, besser soll nicht tun. Muss man mit Fassem sein, bei Jesser Reis, bei Jesser Reis. Als jeder Ries soll wissen, als durch sein 91. Meister und der sein 91. Divu und der sein 91. Machschowe soll wissen sein, als Retzach wegen Jikwisse dem Schiche. Und in der Ruf Gufi Jikwisse dem Schiche. Und nun der Ruf Gufi dort der Psagdin von Nevi Schuhe Azolle Beilom und der Psui noch zugekommen. Damals hat gekonnt, jetzt sein, mit dem Business, jeder Reino, befragt er hat es gegeben, nach Kätz. Befragt, beschaßt man aber gesehen, der Kätz von damals ist nicht durchgegangen, Assyris, Baschonim, ist ein Dover Borer, die einzige Sache, was mir darf Maschlim sein, a jeder soll wissen, dass es sein Ihnen a Proti, auf Mikaim sein oder die Aloch in Lambo, mit Mele hat man kein Breve nicht, muss man halten in ein Tummeln in dem. Aber man soll wissen sein wegen Keizim, man soll wissen sein wegen Jemes Amoschiach, und man soll wissen sein, da alle Prozent, was und man soll wissen sein, der Rike, was nicht, da jene, was steht, nicht ins Vorliegen. Das meint man und das meint man nie, und das meint man Anoschen, Venoschen, Betag, Bejemechon, alle zusammen, Kol, Gol.
So time is moving rapidly here. I have the privilege to introduce Rabbi Shlomi Sternberg and Al Chaviteda, Crown Heights. I have a lot to say and a lot of intros to give, but time is of the essence. So with no further ado, Rabbi Shlomi.
Thank you. Agad Chodesh. So he introduced me as a Manal. So there was the famous Manal, Rabbi Yossi Goldstein, known as Uncle Yossi, which was a Manal for many years in Borough Park in Beis Yaakov, was a Machanech for many of us here. And he was once asked, how did you become a Manal? So he said, well, I tried learning and I wasn't a good student, so I tried becoming a teacher. And then I saw I'm not the best at being a teacher, so I tried becoming a Manal. That's how I'm here. So we're talking on the subject of every one of us and every one of our Talmidim, every one of our children, every one of our Mekuravim, seeing them as the one that's going to do it, seeing them as Mashpin, seeing them as Mechanchim, as the ones that are going to bring Mashiach. And there's this theme that we see throughout all the years, from the first Sikha, and in all the Rebbe's letters, we see the Rebbe pushing every one of us to become a Mashpia, every one of us to be a Shliach, every one of us to be the one to bring Mashiach. And if we think about it, you know, I've heard from those that I was able to listen to over the last few hours of the Farbrengen, there are those that look at the Sikha of Chav Ches Nissen as a Chiddush, it's a breakthrough, and this is a new beginning. And there are those that look at it more as really the Rebbe is telling us the same thing that he's telling us for years and years. He's just now banging on the table and making sure that we actually got it, that we actually start moving in that direction. And I think the Teuchen of the Sikha is exactly what the Rebbe is telling us throughout all the years. And especially in the area of Chinuch. And I believe Rabbi Sheis Taub started the Farbrengen on this topic. The Rebbe's Miftzah Chinuch was not just that we should get to every Yiddish child and give them a Yiddish Chinuch. The Rebbe's Miftzah Chinuch is to turn every one of those children into a Mechanech. That's what the Rebbe himself said. And I want to share a few letters from the Rebbe throughout the years, even before Miftzah Chinuch, where this is the Rebbe's Shita in Chinuch. Take every child and turn him into a Mechanech. He should be influencing. I hope I could share my screen. Okay. So sometimes we see the letters of using the most talented students to be teachers for younger classes. And sometimes we see completely different scenarios. But here we're talking about using the Talmidim in the higher classes to teach or to be madrich the younger Talmidim. And the Rebbe talks about the mile of this picking up Haramas Haruach, and it's Moisef in their learning, it's Moisef in them being careful and being medactic in Anhaga Toiva. And the Rebbe says, don't let it get to their heads. They're not becoming a teacher or a principal. They should rotate, shouldn't always be the same people. And this balance of keeping them Talmidim, yet in the same time, turning them into Mashpim. So here we're talking about the older Talmidim. And we see the Rebbe says this itself, that we give them that trust, we give the imun in these Talmidim. This itself is moisiv tremendous in them. This is another letter. And the Rebbe brings up a very important likud in the second ket over here. It says you might be concerned that they're not so experienced. And we all know, those of us that are in any area of Hashpah, that the younger we are and the more new we are, the more mistakes we make. But the Rebbe says that their hislavus and their excitement of this achrayis overweighs the chisronis that they're missing. They're not the most professional mechanech. You can have a professional mechanech and he's worn out, right? He's burnt out. And you can have a young child that's giving his first shir in his life. He's giving his first class and he's molei chayis, and that chayis compensates for that which is missing, which is interessant in the kudah. So there it says, Taka, you have to think, not everyone is roi for everything. You need to think about this well. However, the Rebbe says, I'm asking you to please think about this in a serious way and find the right thing for the tchunas hanefesh of that Talmud. However, the Rebbe says, please be mishtadel to do this, because the te'elis is tremendous for the Talmidim more than for the yeshiva, what the yeshiva is going to gain from this. Here's the famous sikha where the Rebbe was asking that every class, every school, or the whole kita should have a gemach. So we're not just talking about teaching, we're talking about influencing in a way of gemilus chasadim. There should be a gemach from every moisid, and even better, every class, that the Talmidim should give from their money to this Karen, and more than giving money, put them in charge. They should have responsibilities of being the menal of the Karen, or the gizbar of the Karen, and it should constantly change. There should be votes, and every month there should be another menal of the Karen, or the treasurer of the Karen. And this regesh of achrayus, they're not just giving money towards something; they're in a position of leadership. This itself is going to train them to get into this and be involved with their whole nefesh. Now here we have another scenario. We have troublemakers. So there's a teacher that's writing that in her class, the davening is not the way it's supposed to be. How do we get the kids more involved? The Rebbe says, turn them into monitors. Put one in charge of giving out the Sidurim, one in charge of accepting this, taking back the Sidurim. Let one be marking. And also the Rebbe says always to rotate, that it shouldn't be that one is always in charge. Everyone should have a chance to be in a position of giving, in a position of leadership. The most extreme, we'll just move on. The most extreme is this letter, where the Hanhal is complaining that there are bad students to be in the Moisid that are scaring away other Talmidim. And our parents want to take their children out because there are those rotten apples in the school. What are we going to do with them? So the Rebbe says, you have to really look into it. You have to sit down and think. Everyone's different. And the Rebbe says you have to be moisef hashgacha on them. And if you're looking at them more and you're being mashgiach on them more, they'll become better. However, the Rebbe gives an eitzah. And again, we're not talking about the best students, right? And those that could really be a dug machai. We're talking about those that there's a svara that we should kick them out of the school because they're having a negative effect on others. The Rebbe says, give them achrayus. Shematilim alam misupakis. Tafkid achrayus. We're talking about these that were misupik if we should keep them in the ma'aseh. Give them achrayus, and you're going to see that it's going to be ma'or, tesefes b'yir shamayim, and hagatayva v'chulu. Because then they're going to feel that they need to be a dug machai. The Rebbe finishes off. It's an important thing to know for every Moisid. Don't feel bad. You have these types of Talmidim. Every Moisid has some of these. But what's the Rebbe's eitzah? Turn them into leaders. Now, we can look at this as a b'diavad. When you have troublemakers, you have Talmidim that are not motivated. This is a tool. It's a tool. It's one of the tools that work. But we see that by the Rebbe, this is not a b'diavad. We see that by the Rebbe, this is a lechatchila. And this is important for us to understand that the Rebbe's Sicher, Chavches Nissen, and the Rebbe said, Ich habe getan alles, was ich kann, und jetzt gebe ich das über zu euch. This is not a b'diavad. Sometimes we feel, or maybe from the tune of the Sicher, feels like there's a crisis, or Chas v'sholom, something went wrong, and now I have to give it over to you because it's a matzah of b'diavad. But it's not. It's a matzah of l'chatchila, and this is what the Rebbe told us from the first Sicha. Chassidus Chabad is about us doing it, but it's more than that. The Teuchen of Dir B'Tachtonim, the whole theme of the Rebbe, the whole concept of Mashiach, means that every one of us should be doing our part. We shouldn't just be makablim. It's not that there's one Mashpia, there's one Moshe Rabbeinu, that he's the one that's going to schlep us out of Golus, like it was by Yetzias Mitzrayim. In order for the Geula Asida to be Dir B'Tachtonim, in order for it to be a Gula Nitzchis, it has to come through every one of us. There's another Sikha, every Talmud, even small to young Talmudim, should be Magidi Shiurim. But this is what I want to show. In the Maimer of Basi Lagani, that there was Magia and Topshin Nun Aleph from Topshin Lamed Aleph. And it's really throughout the Maimer this Nekudah. The Rebbe says clear there's the part that Moshe Rabbeinu does, and then there's the part that Yidden do. Moshe Rabbeinu's mamshich the Shechina Lamata, Yidden make a Dir B'Tachtonim. These are two shlug. Der Ashvi is the part that Moshe Rabbeinu does, and then he finishes his part. He brings the Iker Shechina Lamata. But bringing the Iker Shechina Lamata is only a hachshara. It's empowering Anshe Ador to do their part. And that is what? To make a Dir B'Tachtonim. And for a Dir B'Tachtonim, Moshe cannot do it by himself. Yidden cannot do it without Moshe. Moshe empowers us. Ich give us Iritzayr. The Rebbe is giving us the koyach to do it. But this that we need to do it is not because this is a preparation for Chav Zayin Adar, and they were saying, I need to go, so b'di'evet, you're going to have to be my hands and feet. It's not a b'di'evet. This is a lechatchila. And this is what the Rebbe is telling us from the beginning. And this is so extreme, in such a ma'apecha, in the Rebbe's shit in everything, in trusting every chassid. And I think we can all agree. How do we stop the share? What's the share? We can all agree from knowing ourselves, knowing our Talmidim, knowing Chaverim, how many of us know that going on shlichus brought out in us tremendous koiches that we never knew about before? How many of us saw in our children or our talmidim or in chaverim that when they were makablim, as long as they were makablim, they were very limited? And that's a nice word. Some of my talmidim that I know through and through, as talmidim couldn't deal with basic struggles. But as shluchim, say as talmidei shluchim, suddenly there's new koiches that came out. And they went on shlichus. There's suddenly new koiches that come out. This is the Rebbe's theme from day one, turning every one of us into a mashpia. And again, it's not a technique. This is the kavanah. This is the ultimate kavanah. Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev hat geteicht, v'hoyeki sholcha bin chamacher lemer mazois. V'martilov v'choyzik yod v'itzion Hashem v'mitzion. He says, why does it say mazois? Should have said mazeh. Why zois? Why lashon akeva? So he says, Lashon Akeva, he's asking mazois. There was such a big deal. There was such nisim. There was such a shturim. Why didn't this last? Why wasn't Pchinas Nekeva? Why wasn't the Gulas Mitzrayim a Gula Nitzchis? So V'marti Love, you have to tell your child, Ki b'choisik yad yitzon Hashem Mitzrayim. Because we were taken out of Mitzrayim, L'mayla Lamata. We were pulled out of Mitzrayim. The Eibishter did it. Moshe Rabbeinu did it. But we didn't do it. The Geula Asida that has to be Zeh, it has to be a Shir Chodesh, it has to be B'china Zacher, everyone has to be a Mashpia. La'aseh Lavi, there's not going to be Makablim. It's going to be B'china Zacher, everyone has to turn into a Zacher, everyone has to be a Mashpia. As long as we're Makablim, we're in Golos. A Makabel, when it's not mine, the Geula is not mine. What I'm doing is not mine, I'm following. I am still in Golos. And therefore the Geula doesn't stick. When it turns into Maina Inyan, I'm the Mashpia, then it sticks, then it's a real Shinun. That's Geula. And that's a Geula Nitzchus. We see this so many times that in our personal life, we could be struggling with something. We could have a Shiloh that's bothering us. We could have something that's nudging us. And we can't find an answer. We can't find the words that inspire ourselves or that answer our own questions. But when we're on Miftzayim, when we're on Shlichus, when we're in a position of giving, and someone asks us that question, it's not just that we have words, Mekenim Einred. Mitamol, the in your life. Mitamol, the truth, is Begilui. Why? Because when we're in a state of Mekabel, it's not us. And we're in a state of Mashpia, it's Nisachid with us, it becomes us. If you want to look a little more into the words of the Rebbe in the Sikha, Tut als was kennt. In Yiddish, it's not so clear was kennt means. What does it mean, what I could? But if we look at the Mugadik Sikha, Asu kol asher b'yecholtechem, Kent is not translated b'koichachem. It's translated b'yecholtechem. It's not do everything that's in your power, do everything that's in your potential, which is a whole different vart. Power, koiches means what I know, the part of myself that I know. Yechoilis is the part of myself that I don't know. The Yechoilis of a nefesh is bleak vul. In Yechoilis, we're mushlamim. We have Yechoilis in every area. The Rebbe is telling us, deep digger into yourself. Deeper into yourself. There's the part of you that you know, there's what you think you could do, and there's a lot deeper, there's Yechoilis. There's a reservoir that's bleak full of what you could do. And to bring Mashiach, you need to tap into Yechoilis. It's a whole different world. And again, I think that this is connected with the same Nakuda. When we're Mekablim, we're limited. We're with our koiches. So one is smarter, one is not as muchsher. You see them as Talmidim, you see someone that he's on the bottom of the class, he's not doing well as a Talmud. Mitamo, you give him a achrayus, you turn him into a teacher, you turn him into a mashpia, you turn him into a shliach, you send him on the tzoyim, and his potential comes out. In a whole different area. And again, we see that. Look at our own classes. Lav Davka, the Aleph Shema Aleph, are the ones that are today the biggest. Those that went out on shlichus, those that are in a leadership position. Their Yechoilis came out, their bleed vul came out. The Rebbe wants our bleed vul to come out. He wants us to bring out our Yechoilis. There's a lot to talk on this Nakuda, on their hair behind the Nakuda. I think from the Poel Mamish that we could take out from this Nakuda is this is Sai as parents to our children, Sai as Mechanchim to our Talmidim, as Shluchim and our communities, and us with ourselves. The only way we're going to bring Mashiach is if everyone is involved. There's no extra yid. There's no extra minute. There's no extra potential that was given to us. Everyone is needed. That's the definition of the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. It comes al yidei amata, and it comes from every one of us. We have to start finding how every one of our children can be leaders. Every one of our Talmidim can be contributing. We have to stop trying to control and making sure that we're constantly talking and they're constantly listening. We have to delegate not just because this is a good technique. It is the most powerful technique. But it's a lot more than that. Perhaps the reason why b'di'evet, sometimes the only thing that works is giving responsibilities, is because this is what our dar needs most. The Rebbe says this, that b'di'evet, we can't fast in our dar, we have to give tzedakah instead of fasting for tshuva, is not by mistake. It's because when we're coming closer to the Geula, we need more tzedakah, we need less fasting and more tzedakah. So they made it harder to fast and easier to give tzedakah. This, that in our dar, it's harder to get our children to follow, and it's easier to get them to lead. We don't have to fight this. We have to embrace this. This is because our dar is not meant to continue following. Our dar is meant to lead. The Rebbe gave it over to every one of us because that's what our dar needs most. We have to start being like the Rebbe. We have to stop looking to be leaders over everyone. Everyone should follow us. We have to be leaders like the Rebbe and turn everyone into leaders. Every one of our children, every one of our talmidim, every one of the people in our communities. Shliach eis shliach. That is the kavanah. It's not going to work anymore the old way because the Rebbe is not letting that work anymore. The Rebbe wants us to turn everyone into leaders. I'll finish off. There's Shlomo Chaim Kesselman once said a story that he was by a chuppah, and the chassan of and he didn't know what to say, and he's putting on the ring, and so he had to say after him. He told him, "Hare, hare, at, mekudeshes, no." So the chassan said, "No." So he says, "I couldn't tell him lead, because then maybe she'd be married to me." So he says what he learned from that is the lead kemen is zogen for me. The lead darfman zogen alein. No one could say the lead for you. You have to say the lead by yourself. The Rebbe could say for us, "Hare at mekudeshes." Every one of us have to say the lead. There's the part that the Am has to do. No one could do that for us. And perhaps at a certain point, after the Rebbe talking to us and talking, bleak vol, at a certain point, all we heard the Rebbe saying is no. And that was the most painful thing for us to watch. That the Rebbe wants something to happen, and the Rebbe is not telling us what it is. And is that a b'di'evet? Or is that exactly what the Rebbe is saying? No, I can't tell you the next thing because you're supposed to figure it out. Because that's how we bring Mashiach. So this is something we need to do with our children, and this is something we need to do with ourselves. We have to realize that the Rebbe put us in a position of leadership, and no one's going to do our part, just like we can't do the Rebbe's part. The Rebbe Kiviyachol can do our part. Our children can do our part. Everyone, if they're here, if they wish to put us in the world, if we have another minute, it's because there's something that we could do and no one else could do. And without our part, can Mashiach nicht kommen. So l'chaim, we should use the day of Chav Ches and the hemshech of the day, going into Rish Chodesh, to use our yechelas, dig deeper into ourselves, bring out our yechelas, every one of us, and bring the Mashiach b'poyol mamish. Good Chodesh.
Yashakayach Rabbi Sternberg, beautiful, l'chaim. The whole thing, the emceeing and everything is just worth it to hear your words. L'chaim. I had over one of my children's friends for Shabbos from Antwerp. Chassidische, Heimische Stib. My son told him that his father is Dach Deruv. So he walked into the hall Friday night, and he tells me, "Du gehst sitzen even uf. You're going to sit on the head table." which happened to be the buffet, by the way, I said, no, I'm actually going to be amongst the crowd. So he was very confused. He goes, by the time Shabbos came to the end, he says, du bist nicht der Rebbe, du bist der Shliach. So may we all fulfill, lead from within and take those words to heart. Thank you so much, Rabbi Sternberg. And we're going to go to the Sikha, the actual Sikha of Chav Ches Nisan 1991.
Azafal piva das is a dover mugbal und suyam modu du mugbal. Und Konger sein als gar in am Madim in Erech Reche wie Eimek Hachik-Tane. Is in dem do in Joni, was ist eine verbunden mit ein Seif. Wie mir sagt, was beim Juchot mit Kupaseinu Zu, wo sie Tage Rabbas haben Humeis und Tischtusch Hagvulim. Biachad im See hat mir sich erklärt, als sie wie es Barru, wie es Labnu, wie es Starfu hat worden. Als sie wird nennt zu Bias Meshiach Zitkenu, wo demult wird sein der Reben Bimilue noch mehr wie Bishas Habrio. Eile Teil Smole, Teil des Peres. Wer teichet Nisgale in Yonim Chadoshim und Protim Chadoshim in Eilem Hazeh Agashmi bis in Eilem Hazeh Achumri bis wanita das wird Eich Nimshach in Chochmis Chitzenies kemevur Bezeher as von Schnaas Sheish Meyes und wie der See tatscht das so a von Schnaas Sheish Meyes lebe Fashishi is ot demot nifku mayonis rabbis ut varubis hashamayim niftoch as a viele ravie a viele kleine in chochmas atero verba ze echet nit teis av chochma bechochma shalohem afal pi vazer inyan lefishois in inyanim chitzenim al kol ponim chitzenim be'erach atero mitzveseo wo das ist der Pnimis Eile. Und wie mir sagt, das Dafki bei Yameinu Eile, bei der Reseinu Eile, wie sie nicht Gabe geworden, als in Ayinje, was bekam uns, das Achikotten. Und bei der Schelifnise hat nach Fakamus Ktano von Adover Gashmi nicht gelegt, kein Nacht und kein Chashibus, Dafki durch, was in die Teser geworden, die Chochmes Chitzenis hat Megale gewähnt, als in Akamus Achik-Tana von Ageshem wird das voneinander geteilt, Afribu, Chalokim und Protim, was jeder von sie hat in sich echt kam Protim. Und das wird zusammen Akeach Achi Adi, was eben nur mehr will, kommen das Eisnutzen, Liteiv und Litikun Hoelom, wie mir sagt, was ist der Rechet bei Pashtus, Davke bei der Seino Ebu, auf einer kleinen Kamus bei Geshe, kommen Nufton Gdeles Vachadoshes, in Tikun Oelom, bis a der Funk kommt a Resa Teyeles, le Ribui Bnei Odom, afal Piva das a Kamus in Beinen, und der Jeles kommt a Reis zu a Ben Odom und Bnei Odom in Seichel und Chochma. Und sie sagen, haben die, was man pflegt, oder dem Keich, was sie behalten, in dem Kamus Achik Tano.
Once again, I want to ask everybody, take a moment and share the link if you didn't yet, or share it somewhere else if you didn't yet, to pass along and get other people to be able to enjoy and take advantage of this awesome opportunity of being here all together. Ba'achdus. The next speaker we're privileged to have with us doesn't need any introduction. All I will say is have been privileged to serve alongside him on the battlefield, and still do, but at different continents, but back as Bahrain, and his true, genuine love before he was perpetually hoarse. Knows no boundaries and literally has affected and continue to affect and not only the outside world, but turning the outside in and making sure not one child is lacking any love and message of the Rebbe. With no further ado, Brigadier General of Chaylei Tzivos Hashem, Rabbi Shimi Weinbaum.
Thank you. So that was a beautiful, kind introduction. I also want to say a huge yasher koyach to Shlomi Neparstak and the organizers of today, Marcus 302, for not only for this Farbrengen and for all they're doing, because this is really going to bring Mashiach, and I want to thank them for the big schos to be part of this. There was a gentleman who came from England, like I do. He came to America, and he had his life's dream. Now was to be able to be part of Broadway. He wanted a part in the play. He comes to New York and he goes to sign up, and they hear his beautiful English accent and they say, "We have the perfect part for you." And they take out the script and they give him his line. When it comes to this part in the play, you're going to say the words, "Woe to hear the cannons roar." Well, his dream was made. It was taken 12 months away, but he was going all out, whatever is on his mind the entire time. And whatever he had a moment and there was no one around, he suddenly would go, "Woe to hear the cannons roar." And as time got by and he became so immersed in what he was doing, sometimes he even did it in front of his family. And then as time got closer, he didn't care anymore about anybody or anyone. He was just, you saw him walking down the street and suddenly, "Woe to hear the cannons roar." And this was just his life. Till the moment finally arrives and it's his turn. It's that day, he's saying it the whole time, "Woe to hear the cannons roar, woe to the cannons roar." And then there's the moment. They give him the countdown, 10 seconds, you're going onto stage. He walks out onto stage in his full glory when all of a sudden, bang! This huge bang and commotion and smoke. He turns around and he says, "What in the world was that?" This story I heard from Rabbi Feibish Vogel over 35 years ago. The Rebbe is telling us, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, Megeta Rum Meshreit, we want Mashiach now. He says Mashiach is going to come and we're going to turn around and say, "What in the world was that?" You got to know what it's all about. And then Mashiach comes, you'll be able to see exactly what it is, and we'll be able to say, "Whoa," to see Mashiach coming. I know this is going to be radical, but I got permission to do this. And I know this might be very shocking to many people, but I feel that the general masses have misunderstood what the Rebbe said on Chav Ches Nissen, and I want to use this opportunity to try and clarify that. What if we got it wrong? What if we simply misunderstood what the Rebbe was saying? Why, when you ask someone, "What did the Rebbe say on Chav Ches Nissen?" do they say, "The Rebbe said, I did everything I can to bring Mashiach, and it was all lahabel v'larik." Basically, the Rebbe couldn't do it, and now he gave it over to us. Is that what the Rebbe meant? No. That's not what the Rebbe was saying. Let's read together from the Mogedike Sicha what the Rebbe translated, what he was saying so clearly. Ma'ed yichilani lases kedei shekol b'nei Yisrael yarishu v'yitzaku be'emes v'yifalu l'havias HaMashiach b'peil. What more could I do to get b'nei Yisrael to scream out and cry out to the Eibishter with an emes, the Mashiach should come. The Rebbe is saying, I did all that I can to get you to want Mashiach. and I wasn't Matzliach. I wasn't able to get you to want Mashiach. And the proof? Very simple. Mashiach didn't come. Because if there was people who really cared and really wanted Mashiach, then they would be stubborn and actions of Chaim by the Eibishter. Mashiach would talk to come. So the fact that he was still in Golus is a raya that I wasn't able to repay on you, that you should want Mashiach. Now that's very, very different than saying that the Rebbe did everything he can to bring Mashiach. That's a different story. Now it makes sense that people make this mistake because you listen to the video like we have over and over again, you hear the Rebbe saying the words that people are interpreting. But what the Rebbe was really calling us in Chavches Nissen is to say that we need to want Mashiach. And no matter how much he tried, that didn't work. The Rebbe told us that you're screaming at Masai because I told you to, not because you really want it. So this is the challenge. This is the challenge of Chavches Nissen. How can we want Mashiach for real? And if we really want it, then the rest is history. If you really, really want something, and you really want it, we're going to do all we can to make it happen. And I want to also take this moment not only to clarify what the Rebbe was saying, but also the context in which the Rebbe was saying this. Some people say the Sikha came at a total shock. It was a random Thursday night, Chavches Nissen, or typical regular day. What happened? And I totally think that's not true. If you take a moment to look at the backdrop of this Sikha and see where the Rebbe is coming from, it's a whole different ballgame. You see, throughout the Rebbe's entire Nesias, let's go back earlier. Since the Rebbe is a small child, before I went to Cheder, what was the Rebbe thinking about Mashiach? The Rebbe's entire life is Mashiach. And the Rebbe, becoming the leader of our generation, is telling us, this is the mission of our generation. We are going to bring the Geula. And it goes through decades to make this happen. Finally, comes the moment, the time has finally arrived. And the Rebbe tells us, look what's going on in the world. You see the Gulf War, it's a Gizman Golaschem. You see the end of the Cold War. You see the collapse of communism. And the Rebbe points to Kibbutz Goliath. The Rebbe is pointing to everything that's happening in the world. All the nevuahs that the Nevi'im told us throughout history are happening in front of our eyes. And then we get to the moment, Chedesh Nissen. Chedesh Nissen, Nissen Nigel Wabi Seinov, and Nissen Asidim Leigoyel. This is the month. This is when it's going to happen. You can imagine. We were all there, right? All of us that were there, we were sitting on shpilkes. We were sitting in the edge of our chair. We were waiting for it to happen. We couldn't wait every day. We were expecting it to happen. And Pesach came, and it still hadn't happened. If Nisan came, and it still hadn't happened. But Pesach, that was the day the Eibusha took us out of Mitzrayim the first time. We wanted to make it at the same time. All right, we'll wait till Pesach. First days it doesn't come, for sure. Achin Shel Pesach, that's connected with the Gula Achreina. That's why we don't say Shechiyanu, because it hasn't happened yet. But now it's going to happen, Mashiach, so that for sure. No. But we're not giving up. It's not that the baby's overdue and therefore, it's not going to happen. It must be happening any day now. We're still in Chedesh Nissen, and another day and another day. And now we're right at the end of Chedesh Nissen. It's Chav Zayin Nissen. You would imagine that every one of us would be sitting there frustrated. No, Eibishter, Masai, come on! Can't let this go. And then the Rebbe comes back from Nahiyel. That's not what he sees. That's not what he sees. He sees a bunch of Yidden who have gathered together, and it's okay. It's okay if Mashiach didn't come today. and we'll go to sleep at night. If it doesn't come tomorrow, it's also okay. Really? Really? And obviously, when all of this is happening, the Rebbe turns to us and he says to us, how's it possible that you get together and you're not demanding that Mashiach is here? This is not a shock. This is not a surprise. This wasn't random. This is what the Rebbe is expecting of us. The Rebbe is telling us, Chassidim, there's a huge disconnect. I'm talking, and you're listening. You're even writing it down. You know the exact words I said, but you don't get it. It doesn't bother you. So yes, Chav Ches Nissen, the Rebbe did charge us to do all we can. But the main challenge to us is to care. Caring to a point that we'll do all we can. Caring to a point that we'll be stubborn enough to be pale on the Eibishter to finally bring the Geula. And the Rebbe was challenging us to be truly like him. You see, the Rebbe is the true Yid. Every Yid is supposed to be this way. Every Yid. And like the Rambam says, you're not waiting every moment. This is what every Yid has to live this way. And I gave you the perfect example. This is how I lived my entire life. And I'm expecting that of you. And because I couldn't get you, because you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink, the only thing I can do now is make it yours. Make it yours. And then, hopefully, you'll make it yours and you'll care. Maybe there'll be 1, 2, or 3 people who can come up with a way of how we can actually want Mashiach. Now that we've clarified the Sikha and the setting, I want to take a moment, because over the Farbrengens of Chav Ches Nissen, we spoke about this, and I was challenged with some very real questions, which some of you may be thinking right now. How can I want and truly care about something that I don't even know what it is? Abraham Fries's line, 2,000 years is 1,000,000 years too long to search for a light that I've never known. If people did not get the Rebbe when he was talking to them, how will we, who have not seen the Rebbe, get him? Another question. I cannot believe that there wasn't 10 people back then who really cared. And if there wasn't 10 people then, and there isn't 10 people 31 years later, Haraya was still in Golus, what's going to change now? And if there is going to be 10, I'm definitely not one of them. Wow. There are times when I did feel like Mashiach was coming, for sure. Actually, when Corona kicked in, our family even chipped in to buy a Korban Pesach. But then Pesach came and it went and nothing. How can you always live on the edge? Great questions. Does the Rebbe really want us to be frustrated? Cautious that we're in Golus? Doesn't the Rebbe put a huge emphasis on Simcha? If Mashiach is what we really need, then why doesn't Hashem just give it to us? Maybe, the next question, maybe at that time, there was a ketz, an auspicious time for Mashiach to come, but we missed it. Who said that Mashiach is really coming now? And then the bomb, which is practically, what can we do now? And I felt like these questions, this Chazer Sikha, but if we're all thinking, or some of these questions at least, probably be a good idea to address them. So the first thing, the most important thing to establish is that we do care. We really want Mashiach, and we want Mashiach with an emes, as the Rebbe says in the Maimah V'Ata Tetzaveh. Retzeinei Amiti shall call Echad V'Achas Misrael Sheyigili Elokos V'Ad Sheyigili Atzmos. Yes, we innately want Mashiach. This is who we are. This is what we want. We do know what we're looking for. The neshama shalamayla is reya likus, and the neshama shalamayla sees a likus and only wants a likus. But furthermore, the Rebbe is connecting our etzem and neshama with the Eibishter the way it's mushrish in atzmos, and therefore we really don't want anything else. Nishtain ganeden, nishtain elamaba, nardich alein. We only want atzmos. The challenge is that we have to make sure that our keches pnimim, our brain, our heart, are in sync with our etzem and neshama. But it's not creating a new ratzin. It's not creating a new will. It's tapping into what the Rebbe is doing for us, the Ve'ata Tetzaveh, and allowing ourselves to feel what we really, really want. Maybe let's put it this way. The challenge is not so much, how do I care? It's more, how do I stop creating a wall around my heart and not allowing myself to feel what the Rebbe is doing to my neshama? It's like taking Tylenol, because you don't want to feel the pain. Rahman al-Islam, there are times where they induce somebody into a coma so they shouldn't feel the pain. And Golos has somewhat induced us into a coma, not allowing us to feel what our neshama really wants. Who's done this to us? Who's created this horrible coma? And the answer to that is our enemy, the Yetzer Hara. How? He plays with our mind. He lies to us. He tries and he does rob us from what's most dear to us. He tells us, you don't want to live your life as if the Beis HaMikdash is burning. Then he knows you're going to do it. So he tells you, you don't want to live your life like that. You don't want to live your life on the edge. He tells you, don't daven and really, really mean it when you ask for Mashiach. You don't want to feel rejected. Who wants to feel rejected 3 times a day? He tells us, don't think that you can do it. No one before you did it. Even the Rebbe, he makes this up. Even the Rebbe said he couldn't do it. So you definitely can't do it. So don't even bother to try. He tells you, you don't want Mashiach. You want other things. And you know, the Rebbe himself said, you're not screaming with them. So you see, you don't want it. He tells us that we actually are comfortable in Galos. It's actually quite good. Baruch Hashem, we have our chaver begashmias. We have our chaver beruchnias. Galos is not so bad anymore. It's not what it used to be. He's literally, mamish, creating a false reality in our head. He tells us the Beis HaMikdash is not burning. This is not what you want. You can't want something if you don't know what it is. Hasn't happened for so long now. Why do you think it's going to happen in your life? Even if it's going to happen. Stand on the side. Wait for it to happen. And then when the big bang happens and Mashiach is here, jump up with your Lubavitcher flag and say, yeah, I knew it the whole time. This is what the Rebbe said to us in the Sikha. That we're in a Galus Ruchnim and Agiat Avetus Hashem. The Yetzer Hara's passion got us captured. So what's the solution? The solution is we got to go to war. We got to go to war. The goal is to have a complete paradigm shift. You know, this famous story of the guy who's on the train, and there's a kid who's running around, throwing water at people, banging on the train doors, undoing people's shoes. And everyone's looking around, who's this kid? And more importantly, who's the kid's father? And one guy gets frustrated. He stands up and says, does anyone know who this kid is? The guy looks up, sitting right next to him. Looks up and he sees the child and said, it's mine. The man screams at him and says, have you ever thought about how you're going to bring up your child? He goes, actually, I'm just coming back now from the hospital. My wife was just diagnosed with stage 4 of Yana Machla. And I've just been thinking, how am I going to bring up this child? In a moment, in a flash, suddenly people's brains suddenly reverted from looking at this child as a chveisishvas, looking at this father as some reckless father, to suddenly having so much compassion. Because when the brain sees things differently, then we feel differently. This is what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya Me'ach Shalt Alalei. But for this to work, it's not enough just to have information. Alter Rebbe tells us we need to be mizbein in sha'aruch kol yein. What you ate yesterday doesn't help you for today. You got to eat again. And the Alter Rebbe says, if you don't want them yein shov, you need to be mizbeinen. And the Rebbe says in the Maim of Atat be mizbeinen, that the Beis HaMikdash is burning. It's this bonus that works on the brain to create new pathways in the brain, change the Golos mindset and change it to the way we should think and the way we should feel to make the Keches Apnimim Masim with the Yetzim and Neshama. The Rebbe was the 1, 2, or 3 who gave us the answer and told us by learning in Yanigul Mashiach. He tells us that when we learn, when we learn Yanigul Mashiach, we learn that Golos is not the natural place for a Yid to be. We realize that death is not something that's supposed to happen. It only happened because of the Chetei Tzadas. And even then, since Egil's Mangolaschem, it's come time, there should never be death. The Rebbe even said that the Rebbetzin passed away al Menas, that on condition that there'll be Tchias HaMesim in that year in Memches, we've reached the time of Tchias HaMesim, there should not be any more death. That's not the natural way it should be. It's not natural for a Yid to be in Golus. A Yid wants to see the world as Ein Eid Movadi, that there is nothing else other than Hashem. A Yid wants Mashiach. A Yid wants and belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. And every moment it's not built, it's burning, it's being destroyed in front of our eyes. And yes, we need to be in a state of kasus, totally frustrated that the complete goal is not here. We have to be shook into the core. And that will get us to do whatever we can to bring Mashiach. And when we tap into the neshama, who feels this way, who feels totally frustrated that we're in Galus, at the same time, we can be besimcha, because we know that Mashiach is coming, ot kommt Mashiach. And yes, it's true that there are times, like when Corona kicked in, that we felt the neshama, we felt the Mashiach is coming, we had that little taste. But that was mi'erev beiker, that was an external cause making us feel this way. For Mashiach, it needs to be lahalis nei tamid. It needs to be something that we feel when the masks are taken off, we still feel that way. And yes, we can make it happen. We are the ones who will make it happen. We are Yidden, we don't believe in evolution. There are people that believe that everything that happened over the last 30 years just evolved. That's the Yetzer Hara. We know that everything that's happened in the last 30 years and more has changed in the world in the last 30 years than happened in 5,754 years. All of that is the Gilui of Mashiach coming into this world. It's not random technology and medicine changing. And the Rebbe told this to us even before the Rebbe actually told the BBC reporter when he asked the Rebbe, Have we entered the Messianic age? The Rebbe's response was, long ago. But if you don't know what Mashiach is, it could be happening in front of your eyes, and you can say, what in the world is that? Rather than saying, woe to live in the days of Mashiach. And it's important to recognize that these changes happen through us. It's not that nothing happened. This was going on 30 years ago and then everything stopped. No, this has been a continued gilui of Shekhinah into this world through the Aveda. And yes, the people then and the people now are making it happen. It's just we need to finish off the job. But don't stand on the sidelines. Make sure you jump in and you not only recruit yourself and you change your mindset, your family, and ultimately it's our responsibility to change the world, to get the whole world to recognize that Egiya Zman Golaschem. And it's important to recognize that you have nothing to be worried about getting burnt out. We're like electric cars. The more we do and the more frustrated we are and more besimcha we are, that empowers us even more. It's a myth of the Yetzer Hara that we're going to get burnt out and that we can't live this way. You might not be so comfortable. Of course, the Yetzer Hara wants you to be comfortable. He doesn't want you to live on the edge, but turn around to him and tell him, no, we're fighting a war against you, who's lying to us and wants to keep us in galus. But you're not going to win. We're going to get rid of you and we're going to get rid of all the bad in the world. We're going to tell the Yetzer Hara, we have news for you. We are Tzivos Hashem. We are Hashem's army and we're going to conquer the world for Hashem. We're going to get rid of your lies. You are done. And together we're going to go out of our personal galus. We're going to prepare ourselves, our family, and the whole world. And I can't wait in Mirza Hashem with all of that Asa Chassidim and all of the Shluchim and all of the Yidden in the entire world, with the children leading the way, will march out in victory march out of Galus, and will dance the most incredible celebration with the Geula Amitis V'Ashlema B'Karei Mamash. Chai.
Amen, amen, l'chaim l'bracha. May the Lord continue to shine his radiance upon you, and may you continue to share that with all. Thank you so much. When you go to a doctor and he prescribes medicine, speaking to Rabbi Weinbaum's point, he typically doesn't like the fact that you studied about it on Google, and he definitely doesn't tell you to study about Google. He tells you to take the pill. The Rebbe tells us about Mashiach: study about it, learn about it, engage, find out what it's about. So when that big bang happens, you'll actually know. Helping us in that manner, took the torch and the bold duty from his father, was given to him or thrown at him. It's Rabbi Afton from Sichas in English, helping us delve into and get into the depths of what Mashiach is. And thanks to Rabbi Yonav Afton of blessed memory, who gave us so much and pushing the envelope and making sure it's available. But right before we do that, I think we're going to go to a Sicha, a clip from the Rebbe, and then we'll go straight to Rabbi Afton.
Zij zegt, dat men neemt in zijn man van Golus, und man stellt da rein innewenig, aber in der Nähe von Golui, der malufische Leilom, der Mine von Göttlichkeit, ist noch jede Sekunde Geula Hamitis war schlimmer, ist schöner zu dämmelt, ist noch in meinem Dumatze von Gela, stellt rein alle dem Szene war wieder Szene, durch sein tagtäglichen Leben, stellt rein Göttlichkeit inmitten von alle seine Piulis, sei Befichu, sei Bilfofcho und sei La Seise, oder dämmelt lässt sich und lässt es die alle Unionen, in welche ist Eise, oder Medaber, oder Mechashev, lässt es die, auf welche ist Maschpia, als Minenu Yiru, Vechen Yasu, als sollen sich hechet, als fielen, aber sie soll leicht kommen, die Geula Protis, und die Schaße legen sich zusammen. Kame wie kame Geula Protis, wer sich demol der Dino Halocha Psuko, als Hilchen Acher Horev, gefragt noch leiten Psagdin von Rambam, als Leilom, wo es für ein Mai mit dem Matze, wo es Mann und Mokke mehr soll nicht sein. Is a Chiu, a Fayiden, soll sein Atzmi Schokul, v'chol ha'elam Kuli Schokul. Bemele kann Machria sein, durch ein und einzige Meister der Dibur oder Machshove Shalei. Nicht wie der Jeser will einreden, aber es ist sehr wichtig, als ein und einzelner Mensch. Und sagt, ja, da jenisch benafsche, sei mal mit dem Matze, sie wird sich essen mit dem Wort. Oder essen sich auch viele mit der Meise, Allah es kam wie kam, was ist Tefis Smokim, sei nach Machshove. Passen der Rambam ob als Psag Din, a das kann Machria sein, Atzmi v'chol Elam Kule, und bringen a Zolle wie Yeshua, und in was besteht das? Die nekudische Bedauer besteht in Druf auf Hereinstellen nach Lufe Shalelon, bechol Piule Shalei.
So with no further ado, actually I have one more video roll right before we go to Rabbi Avtzon.
Spending Pesach here together. At our program, we wanted to do a learning component, and we chose to use the curriculums by Tut Alts. I think that both renditions, the adult and the children's, are terrific.
I think this book makes it relatable in a way that I haven't learned it before, so it's nice to have it laid out clearly.
I like having the book because it's fun to learn.
I like learning from it, and I like new clean books.
Incredible. The Rebbe tells us from Darf Nar Effen in the Eigen, the amount of stuff that's being produced, printed digitally and available across the world, and even if you don't want to read because you're too lazy, you could just listen in a video. Our eyes are being pried open slowly but surely. Our eyes, our ears, and everything you just saw from Tut is incredible and amazing, and no doubt Rabbi Avtzon from Sichas English has a very big hand in that, and a great yashakayach to you, and much strength in lighting up our eyes and then continuing to bear the very important torch that you do, and may we see it. B'muchash, b'vakasha, Rabbi Avtzon.
Thank you, Rabbi Rosenblum. We're good? You hear me? First of all, Shimi, speaking after you, puts me in a really, really tough position. I didn't get the exact schedule before. I would have played with the hours a bit, but I'll try to feed off your energy. So, yes, you mentioned my father, and yeah, I had the schos growing up with my father and seeing the work that he did, etc., etc. Besides from my father, one of the interesting characters that were a part of my childhood, perhaps, and were sort of was really connected to our shaykhs to the Rebbe and the work my father did. There was a yid by the name of Harry Spiegel. His name is Chaim Yitzchak Spiegel, and goes by Harry. Many of you probably know him or remember him. In those years, in the 80s, early 90s, pretty much he bankrolled the Mossad. In other words, a new sefer had to come out. He would pay for it. He would bring it to the Rebbe, and there was a yid that was zeicha to tremendous kiruvim from the Rebbe. As I heard from my father, that on Hey Tevis, Tafshin Mem Zayin, so as the news came in that Dida Natzach, so what's everyone doing? Everyone ran to 770, and over here, everyone ran to 770 and said L'chaim and was dancing and started the 7 days of Simcha. My father was speaking to Harry Spiegel, to Chaim Yitzchak, and they were like, okay, what can we do? How can we give the Rebbe Nachas? How can we do something for Hafatza? And right away, Harry said, okay, I'm sponsoring a sefer. There was Hey Tevis, and that's ultimately, what's the mission of Hey Tevis? What's the real message of Hey Tevis? Hafatza Mayanis. And my father wrote into the Rebbe, and my father got a minor from the Rebbe that day before Mincha. In other words, from what I've seen, minus that have been printed and come out, this is the only minor that I found. Spiegel told me that he heard from Rabbi Groner that there was another minor. There were two minors the entire day. This was before Mincha. Before the Rebbe came down to Mincha, the Rebbe already gave a Yasher Koyach for printing Chassidus and for that sponsorship for printing Chassidus. It was a very, very stark Ikruv. Anyway, one of the things that he did, and it wasn't just one of the things, by the Rebbe, this was like the thing. Every time he came to the Rebbe, it was by dollars, by Farbrengens, by Machne Yisrael, Development Fund, those Yechidusin. The Rebbe would always speak to him about the shifel. What's the shifel? He started making these cruises, these trips. We get the Balabatim, he lived in California, Balabatim would come, the Shluchim would come, and on this cruise, they would talk about Yiddishkeit and Farbrengen. And it was very, very mutzlach. Ad kedei kach that the Rebbe by a Farbrengen once spoke about it, and an entire sicha about the Indian of a cruise, the Indian of a ship, and the Rebbe was magia this sicha. There's a mugadig sicha in Sefer HaSichos about Harry Spiegel's ship, and the Rebbe spoke about Barichas. What's the idea of going on a ship? That here in this world, our neshamas came onto this world. We're in the waters, and we need a ship, a boat that keeps us afloat, and we have our Torah mitzvahs that keep us afloat. A whole arichas, Parshas Ekev, Tafshin Mem Zayin. Check it out. Anyway, he comes to a yechidus by one of the Machne Yisrael development fund yechidus, and in the later years, pretty much these were the only yechidus pratis that existed. Twice a year in Tishrei and in Nisan, there would be a yechidus. Meeting for Machne Yisrael Development Fund for the Mishtafim, people that would give money to Machne Yisrael. There would be a sicha, and after the sicha, everyone would be able to come over to the Rebbe and had a few minutes of personal yichid. This is actually, there are videos from this. Videos were taken, obviously personal videos, and these videos only come out when the people that were there agreed to it. But what's fascinating about these videos is this is really the only glimpse we have, especially for many of us that were in Zeicha to this and post-Gimel Tammuz. You actually see what a Yechidus looks like, and you see that interaction. You see the Rebbe speaking to someone. You see the people bearing their souls and asking for the most personal brachas in the most intimate part of their lives, and how the Rebbe gets involved and gives the brachas. And you see unbelievable things, and more than anything, you see the Rebbe's care and personal connection. So he comes to the Rebbe. I think this was one of the first ones. It was Tafshin Mem Zayin, Tafshin Mem Ches. And my father brings him over to the Rebbe, introducing him. And this is Chaim Yitzchak Spiegel that made the cruise ship, that Pu'ula. If it's shaykh to bring on that clip, it's a small clip, like 30 seconds. But there's watching what the Rebbe says. Maybe even more importantly, there's the Rebbe's response, in other words, how the Rebbe looks at him, how the Rebbe responds. I think it's an unbelievable clip. Just like 30 seconds.
Yes, and I wanted to thank the Rebbe for his brachas Vav, that it was a tremendous success, both materially and spiritually, and that I was able to speak about Mashiach Tzidkenu on the ship.
That is the main thing, not only to speak about him, but to show you the finger, Hine Mashiach Ba.
Amen. I also want to give the Rebbe plans for the mikveh in Simcha Monica and ask for his bracha.
ברכה והצלחה. בכל העניינים וכאילו גם זה. ומתייחסים לך בטוב לבוב ומחסים הטבע. ברכה והצלחה.
I would also like to ask the Rebbe for a brucha for a new shul, Chabad house in Chabad of Northern Beverly Hills that we're very active in trying to put together right now.
That build it on the hill, that it will be short to all the surroundings. You will see that is the best Chabad on the hill.
Amen.
Bracha v'atzlacha.
Right, so that was a bit longer, but was mainly the first part. And what's fascinating to me is, right, so he tells the Rebbe that the cruise happened, the pulla happened, and there was atzlacha begashmius, beruchnius, and the Rebbe is looking at him like, okay, that's all very nice. And then he mentions, and I spoke about Mashiach, and you just see the Rebbe, I don't even say the Rebbe's eyes light up. You just see like the Rebbe, like it's like a moment of recognition, like, oh, that's the main thing. Like everything else, very nice, gashmius, ruchnius, that's all gewaldic. But that's the main thing, and not only they speak about Mashiach, but Marabet's boy by Mirza. In other words, you should actually be able to feel it. It should be tangible. You should be able to point at it, and right, it should be something real. And ultimately, that Mashiach should be begashmius. That's the main thing. Whereas by the Rebbe, what's the word? It's like sometimes when we think of Mashiach, we have a checklist, right? So there's a whole bunch of things we have to do. We're chassidim. So there's obviously there's Shulchan Aruch, there's Limud Chassidus, there's the Miftzayim, there's a Hilchis Chassidus and Hilchis Skashrus, etc., etc. And now with Chavches Nissen, Dele Chavches Nissen comes, and all of a sudden we realize, okay, Mashiach's important. So we'll put Mashiach at the end of the list. You're more Chassidus, you put him in the middle of the list, you put him at the top of the list. It's mamish number one. It's not another thing on the list. And if you use the Loshoinus of the Sich and Chavches Nissen, it's in other words, okay, it's another thing. In other words, you do it with Pnei Atzivo. Is it really that bad if you do something with Pnei Atzivo because the Rebbe asked that you do it? The Rebbe was mitzvah that you should do it. The Rebbe commanded you should do it. That's what Chassidim do. Chassidim do what the Rebbe asked them to do. Okay, so you put it on the list, and you did that as well. You see again, more than the word, it's like just the look in the Rebbe's eyes. Oh, that's the main thing. That's really what it's all about. It's all about Mashiach. That's your life. Everything else is a prat, is a nekudah, is a titzah from that main point, main inyan. I want to say a vard v'chavches nissen, the sicha, and I know I wasn't up all night, sadly. Probably if I should have been inspired to watch all the drushes. But just something that I've been thinking about. And we've all looked at the Sikha and seen the Sikha, watched the Sikha, the Rebbe saying it, and learned the Sikha, the way the Rebbe was Magiya it. But at a certain point, we always speak about the Rebbe saying that it was Lahebel V'larik, or in the Mugadig of Sikha, it says Loi Hoyel, that all the Rebbe tried to do, the Rebbe was, the Rebbe didn't succeed, it didn't help. And what exactly did the Rebbe try to do? What did the Rebbe try to do? What didn't work? And what's the solution, right? Because that's ultimately what at least the end of the Sikha, the Rebbe is saying, I tried to do something, number one. Number two, it didn't work out. Number three, so the only thing I can do is the following. Okay, so what was the attempt? What was the failure, if you may? And what's the solution? So when you look at the Sikha, so what the Rebbe really says is like this. So the Rebbe asks two questions. Number one, that Haytachin, standing at such an amazing time, right? The entire Sikha, the Rebbe spoke about what an Eis Ratzon it is for the Geula. We haven't brought Mashiach yet. It's completely not understood. And another wonder is that so many Yidden come together at such an opportune time, and they're not making a storm about Mashiach, and they're not bothered, right? It's not mufrich by them that Mashiach won't come tonight, he won't come tomorrow, he won't even come in 2 days. Even Mashiach, as the Rebbe said, right? It's fine, I can live with it. And even when you scream on Masai, it's Pnei Atzivoy, it's because it's one of the things we have to do. But if we would really scream it, then Emes, Mashiach would have come already. And then the Rebbe says like this. So, what else can I do to make, to influence, to mashpia on Klal Yisrael, Shekol Bnei Yisrael, all Yidden should scream and request and ask for Mashiach and do all they can to bring Mashiach. after all that I did till now, didn't help. In other words, after all that I did, what? What did the Rebbe do? After all that I did to get you all to really care about Mashiach. Right? There is an understanding where the Rebbe said that all I did to bring Mashiach didn't help. When you hear the Sikha, maybe you could understand in different ways. When you look at least the Mugadik Sikha, it seems pretty clear that what the Rebbe is saying is that, in other words, the Rebbe's frustration, if you may, is how is it that all I've been trying to do for so long to get you to care about Mashiach hasn't helped? This Sikha really comes after obviously 40 years of the Rebbe's Nesiyas. So if you look back, especially the 10 years prior, Tufshin, Mem Aleph, Mem Beis, when the Rebbe started storming about Ad Masai, and almost every Farbrengen, Shabbos Farbrengen, weekday Farbrengen, the Rebbe would have a Sikha or two about Ad Masai, and the Rebbe would scream Ad Masai, and Haytachin were in Golos, and the Rebbe would cry out to the Eibush there, and bear his soul with the Chassidim about Haytachin were another moment in Golos. And there was a response. Chassidim kachtim Mashiach. And after these sikhs, they would always sing Ad Masai, scream Ad Masai. There was a Farbrengen, a Lag Baimer Farbrengen, Tafshem and Vav, where the Rebbe was speaking so passionately about Mashiach that it really swept everyone out of their seats. And for the next hour and a half, in the middle of a Farbrengen, imagine, in the middle of a Farbrengen, an hour and a half singing Ad Masai. People weren't bored. People had lives. You come to the Rebbe's Farbrengen, you hear something, but just to sing hour and a half. And it was actually, and it was mamish a very interesting event, and it wasn't expected, and everyone was a bit shocked by it. So much so that in the papers, at least there was a paper that wrote after this Farbrengen that something happened to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. That by the Farbrengen they sang Ad Masai for an hour. In the Rebbe's Farbrengen, they're singing for an hour and a half. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe went a bit crazy, crazy about Mashiach. A little while later, a few days later, there was a few Askanim came to the Rebbe for Yechidus to discuss something that was very negay at the time. The law that was supposed to be passed in New York, Tashman Vav, a story of its own. And there was a Yid Noach Dir that came then to the Rebbe. He was a councilman at the time. Later he became a judge. I think he passed away a year or two ago from COVID. And he was there, and a few other Askanim. And they were talking to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe mentioned, as the Welt sagt, as if we're crazy about Mashiach. And different Gersayis, but possibly the Rebbe also said that und sie seien gerecht, and it's true. Why did the Rebbe become crazy about Mashiach? Because all of a sudden, if I bring you're singing an hour and a half Ad Masai. What is supposed to mean? Obviously, there was a lot of passion. There was a lot of raw emotion about Mashiach by the Rebbe, and by extension was given over to the Chassidim. And this is going on for years. And now the Rebbe comes in after all these years and says, very nice, everyone's screaming Ad Masai. It's Pnei Tzivui. Now, what's Pnei Tzivui? It's not like the Rebbe finished the Sikh and said, okay, everyone, Medarif Shrayin Ad Masai, and therefore they screamed. Sometimes it wasn't. The Rebbe said clearly, say Ad Masai. And they said, but sometimes the Rebbe spoke passionately about the Inyan, and as a natural response, Chassidim, you see that it bothers the Rebbe so much, and this is your life, by the Rebbe's Farbrengen, and as a natural response, Mishrayit Ad Masai. But somehow, at least in the Eid al-Oif, and that's also Mipnei HaTzivui. Mipnei HaTzivui doesn't have to mean that I tell you you have to do it. It's you see this is what the Rebbe is koching in, so Mamela you koch in it. Okay, so after all that, all these years and all that passion, all the sichis and all the mamarim and all the pu'ulis and everything with the Rebbe screaming Mashiach for so long from day one, and somehow we're not getting it. Lo yoyil. What's the proof? The proof is two proofs, right? That we're in Galus. And more importantly, that we're in Galus Pnimim Yon Avedis Hashem. Right? To put Galus Pnimim Avedis Hashem as V'oid V'ikir, like that's the real issue, isn't the ultimate goal. Like, what's the ultimate goal? We should leave our Galus Pnimim, or that we should all leave Galus? The ultimate goal is we should all leave Galus. But if you're looking at what's the real proof that we didn't get it, this that we didn't leave Galus, it's one proof, because if we would have gotten it, we would have all left Galus. But sometimes there could be other reasons why we didn't leave Galus. There could be none in Mulmaila. But this that we're in a Galus Pnimi means that it hasn't affected us. In other words, there's no way about it. If you're in a Galus Pnimi, it's very clear that you haven't been affected, at least in a real way. Okay, so what's the solution? So the solution is a davar yichidi sheichilani lases the intgezach was a kanachton. Ich gebe es immer jeden von euch tut als was ihr kennt. So I'm giving it over to you to bring Mashiach. I'm thinking about it, and let's try to use simple terms to understand what's going on, like how this is supposed to resolve the issue, right? So you're running a company and you have a whole bunch of employees. And see a bunch of people, in many different tiers, what job they have. But now you want to elevate some area, right? You need to put people as managers, project managers, COOs. You want to give them higher positions in your company, in your moisa, whatever it is. So now, who are you going to choose? Who are you going to give the job to? So there's obviously a list, a checklist of things that have to be filled out, and different boxes that have to be checked off. Obviously, the guy needs kishreines, passion, people skills, etc., etc. But the first and most important thing that someone like this needs is interest, passion, believing in the mission. That's the first thing. To just do a small job, only at the bottom of the line, you don't need to be so passionate, and you don't need to really buy into the mission. All I need is you to clap and hold. Say there, you believe in it, you don't believe in it, you're doing your job 9 to 5, go home. But if I'm giving over responsibility, you give over to people that are passionate, that believe in it. The Rebbe is saying like this. So for so many years, I'm trying to get you excited, to get you involved. It didn't work, at least on the level that the Rebbe expect. In other words, you should really care about Mashiach. So all that work, all that I tried till now, all I tried to do till now didn't work. Okay, so what's my solution? My solution is, here, you be in charge. I'm giving it to you to bring Mashiach. One second. You're giving the job to bring Mashiach to people that don't care? That's it's the biggest recipe for failure. You could say, it's throughout history, and you see this already in Torah, when plan A didn't work out, you tried plan B with different people, right? When the Eibishter saw that the creation of man was somewhat of a mistake, perhaps, and it's not really working out. Okay, so let's get rid of them, and from Noach we'll start a new nation. When there's by Moshe Rabbeinu, right after they serve the Egels, the Eibishter says, okay, let's achala, we'll get rid of them, and Moshe Rabbeinu, from him we'll start a new nation. Because that's what makes sense. The Rebbe, so obviously the Rebbe is not ready to give up on his chassidim, but what kind of solution is this? The solution is you're taking a bunch of people that haven't bought into your mission and making them in charge. And perhaps over here the Rebbe is telling us a very yesodistic inyan that's negate to every single one of us today. Because very often we look at ourselves, we look at others, friends, colleagues, students, mishpacha, etc. And sometimes we wonder, like, am I shaykh? Are they shaykh? Do they really get it? They just don't get what's going on. Like, we're trying to give over a message and they're pushing, not getting it. And how do we inspire people? How do we motivate people? And we look for so many different ways of how to motivate. And there's many rules and there's many ifanim how to motivate people. And here the Rebbe says, you know how to motivate people? Put them in charge. Put them in charge. Give them the achrayis. You see many letters from the Rebbe about chinuch, so parents writing to the Rebbe about a hyperactive child, or teachers writing, principals, a child that's the biggest troublemaker in class. And what do we do about it? How do we just tame this kid? Do we send him out of class for a bit? Or what can I give him, et cetera, or her? And the Rebbe pretty much consistently says, of course, make them into a manig, make them into a leader, give them achrayis. Give them achrayis to what? To spread confetti over, on the teacher in the class. Remember growing up in Al Torah, Baruch Hashem, one of our favorite things is before a teacher comes in to put confetti into the air conditioner, and then by mistake the air conditioner goes on as the teacher walks in, and of course it's money saver's fault. And what are you doing? But this is the vart. If we're just looking at people as a bunch of random chevra that, okay, let's just give them a job to keep them busy, keep them entertained, then yeah, don't give them achrayas. But every yid, what's a yid? A yid is an neshama. A yid is a nitzitz Mashiach. Every yid is Mashiach. Every yid, what's his life? What's his passion? That's his life. That's her life. That's what they live for. Elamai. There's the Yetzer Hara, and there's the Nefesh Bahamis, and there's a Guf, and there's a Golus Prima Avedis Hashem, and we sometimes we don't tap into it. especially the Rebbe is taking achrayus. Of course, we're doing our thing and we're chassidim. We have to do what we have to do. But the Rebbe ultimately will bring the gola. The Rebbe says, I tried many different ways to get you inspired. Somehow it wasn't working. So here's what I'm going to do. You have the achrayus to bring the gola. You do it. And all of a sudden, a moment ago, that same person that you spoke about Mashiach was somewhere between sleeping to nodding their head to, yeah, of course, Mashiach and Chav Ches Nissen. Of course, it's a Mashiach Remembrance Day. This kufa is, the Klal Yisrael is all kinds of remembrance days, the end of Nissen year. So we added Chav Ches Nissen. Yeah, very good, and move on to the next day. No, all of a sudden, when Mashiach is given in that way, that all of a sudden we realize it's our achrayus, it wakes up the nitzvah Mashiach inside every yid, and all of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, this is real. And what can I do? And you actually see this when people sense and realize that you're giving them an achrayus, and it's their achrayus, and especially when it comes to Mashiach, all of a sudden, something that's in the back of their brain, back burner, or completely irrelevant, goes all the way to the front. And yeah, we'll do it. Yeah. Echad, Shnayim, Shloisha, definitely there's a lot more over here. Vasatan, V'yazaytzatan. We take Simcha v'tov levav. L'chaim.
L'chaim l'vracha, Rabbi Yalton, thank you so much. We see what's going on. We see what's going on behind you, and may you continue to pump it in all over the world and everything you do together with all the various different institutions. To talk to what you said about giving achrayus. I'm not sure who told who at what at Tut Alts, but if you want to get Michal Rosenblum to sit down at Farbrengen on a Sunday afternoon for 3 hours, make him an MC. So I want to thank you for dragging me in here. It's an awesome honor and pleasure. I'm running to take my children to get on a flight for the Chidon celebration in Spain. This morning my kids were on Chassid's Club. Tonight my daughter's going to go to sleep with the Tzivus Hashem app. On Sudas Mashiach, we're able to use the curriculums that you guys put forward and everything else that Sweet 302 does. So all of this incredible, amazing work. I want to thank Sweet Tut Alts for making Chav Ches Nissen Anitche. We're already 2 days after Chav Ches Nissen, and we're still talking about the topic. May it permeate us and take us all the way. After listening to the Sikha, we know as Chassidim and in Tanya, there's no place for depression. If a person winds up depressed or with anxiety, then we miss the point. Like Shimi said, full of enthusiasm, besimcha, may it be, and thanks to Sichas in English, shedding a little bit more light on Hayom Yom. The Hayom Yom of Chav Ches Nissen speaks about none other than Ahavas Yisrael, Ahavas Yisrael, Ahavas Yisrael, through and through and through the Rebbe's message from A to Z, backwards and forwards, and the ultimate ingredient. May we all be able to live up to it. Right before I pass over the mic, I just want to finish with a quick, no pun intended, a quick story. As we know, regarding the One Mitzvah campaign, every single person has the possibility, like Rabbi Nemes pointed out so poignantly, it's literally just a click of a mouse, and that's how we're here today. A shliach that I'm close with, right before Pesach in Europe, realized we have a lot of refugees, a lot of Russian-speaking people in Europe. What's going to be for Pesach with Haggadus? So quickly reached out various resources. Rabbi Elkinov from Free put out a feeler, figuring a few thousand. Before you knew it, 32,000 Haggadus in Russian were printed and distributed all across Europe, Ukraine, etc. This happened just because somebody was on another WhatsApp group who heard a conversation. It was a click, and it happened. No big deal, but it happened. Every single one of us has that koyach, has that power. Speaking about the Sudas Mashiach, many spoke over the day. When the Baal Shem Tov started the Sudas Mashiach, was just with matzah. Matzah's humility, humbleness. That's what we need to bring Mashiach. The Rebbe Rashab added in the 4 cases because we have Chassidus, we have the sophistication, we have the knowledge. Wine is sophisticated, it's flavorful, it's beautiful. Thanks to all the various different institutions, and Sichas in English in particular, Chabad.org, that's available in the libraries that are coming online. We have that sophistication. We have it for ourselves. There's only so many shurim we could give personally, and with Zoom and whatever you want. But by a click of a mouse, there's no end. May we see no end, and we'll see the infinite of the Eibishter's hand, infinity, with the coming of Mashiach. May it be today. L'chaim, thank you all so much. Rebbe's video and Rabbi Beryl Lebertov, Santa Fe, Shliach, Santa Fe, New Mexico, will take over. Honor and privilege. L'chaim.
Yeah.
Azei zeget am nemt ins man von Golus und mich stellt da rein inne wenig, aber in a ne von Golus, de malufe Shelelo, de Mine von Göttlichkeit, is noch jede Sekunde Geula Hamitis war schlimmer, is schöner to Demut, is noch in meinem Dumatze von Gela, stellt rein alle dem Szene war wieder Szene, durch sein tagtäglichen Leben, stellt rein Göttlichkeit in Mitten von alle seine Piulis, sei befichu, sei bilfofcho, und sei la seise, oder demel bläst sich, und lässt es die alle Unionen, in welche ist Eise, oder Medaber, oder Mechashev, lässt es die, auf welche ist Maschpia, als Minenu Yiru, vechein Yasu, als sollen sich hechet, als fielen, aber soll lechet kommen, die Geula Protis, und die Schaße legen sich zusammen, Kamer wie Kamer Geula Protis, wird sich demol der Diener Halacha Zucker, als Hilchim Acher Horev, gefragt noch liten Psagdin von Rambam, als Leilom, wo es für ein Mai mit dem Matze, wo es Mann und Mokke mehr soll nicht sein, ist Achil, Afayiden, soll sein Atzmi Schokul, Bechol Oelam Kuli Schokul, Benele kann Machria sein, durch 91 Meister der Dibur oder Machshove Schele, nicht wie der Jeser will einlernen, aber es ist sehr wichtig, als 91 Mensch, und sagt, Joda Yinisch Benafshe, sei Mai mit dem Matze, sie wird sich heißhitten mit der Wort, oder heißhitten sich auch viele mit der Meise, Allahus Kamer wie Kamer, was ist Tefis Smokim, sei nach Machshove. Passen der Rambam ob als a Psagdin, a dos kon Machria sein, Atzmi v'chol Oelam Kule, und bringen a Zolle wie Yeshua, und in was besteht das, die nekudische Bedauer, besteht in Druf auf Areinstellen, a Lufe Shalelon, bechol Piule Shalei.